And grandmother was kicked out as if she were trash, insulted by her own son in front of the whole block. What no one knew was that inside that old suitcase she was carrying was a secret so powerful it would bring the whole family to their knees. This story is going to hurt you, and it's going to make you think about everything we hide behind the silence. "Get your junk out of here," Robert yelled from the doorway, his jaw clenched and his finger pointing toward the sidewalk. Estelle, 83 years old, with trembling legs, could barely hold the suitcase in one hand and the purse slung over the other shoulder. She was standing right on the edge of the street, in front of the house where she raised her 3 children, cooked for decades, and cleaned everyone's dishes, even on Sundays when no one said thank you. But that Monday morning, in the Queen's neighborhood, that same house was spitting her out as if she were a plague. The door slammed shut, a dry sound that echoed off the walls of the neighboring houses and in the ears of the curious people already looking out from their windows. No one dared to intervene. Everyone saw it. No one said a thing. In the silence that followed, clumsy footsteps were heard. They were Estelle's slow steps as she walked away, dragging the suitcase that scraped the concrete. A few yards ahead, one of the broken wheels made her lose her balance. She fell to her knees. And there, in front of the rusty gate of number 218, the grandmother accidentally let go of something. An old envelope, tied with a red ribbon. Robert noticed it and ran down the steps. He grabbed it without asking permission. He opened it, and as he read the first name that appeared on the sheet of paper, something in his face changed completely. "Ignatius de la Torre," he whispered, as if the name burned his lips. While he read, Estelle got up with difficulty. She didn't say a single word. She didn't have the strength to defend herself, nor did she need to. She knew this day would come. She had felt it for years, that cold contempt growing in her own flesh and blood. The street was silent, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding as if it wanted to escape. She picked up the medications that had fallen out of the plastic bag, some for her blood pressure, others for the pain in her legs, and one that she no longer took, because it reminded her of something she preferred to forget. Robert, meanwhile, kept reading. The sheet was yellow, written in firm cursive script, and in the corner, a seal. Notary Public Name 17, Nashville, Tennessee. Below that, a date from 1983. "What is this?" he muttered, looking toward the street, but Estelle was already walking away, without looking back. Patricia, his wife, came out at that very moment. "Did you actually kick her out? Just like that?" "I couldn't take it anymore. She doesn't do anything. She spends all her time complaining, and on top of it keeping secrets." "What secrets?" Robert held up the paper. This isn't just anything. Look at this name. It says I'm someone else's son." "What? Whose?" He didn't answer. The paper was trembling in his hands. A cold sweat ran down his back. Something inside him was breaking. He was feeling fear, a fear he didn't know. Meanwhile, Estelle walked to the corner, where the sun beat down hardest. She stopped for a second, leaned on a pole, and took a deep breath. She thought of her husband, Julian, of his absence, of what he never knew, of what she never said. And she thought of Ignatius, the man whose name no one had spoken in more than 40 years, the man who changed her life and her son's, even though that son never knew it. But all of it was about to come to light. Now, if this story has already touched your heart from this first moment, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this story, which is as real as it is painful. And if what Estelle went through has already moved you, write the word dignity in the comments because even though they humiliated her, she never lost hers. And now listen carefully, because what is coming next is going to change everything. Robert was still standing there, on the sidewalk, as if the ground had been ripped out from under his feet. The envelope was still in his hands. He had opened it with arrogance, without thinking. But what he found wasn't a simple old letter that grandmothers keep for nostalgia. It was something more, something he didn't understand, something he didn't want to understand. He read the name again, this time in a low voice, so no one else would hear it. Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. He recognized it from somewhere. It sounded familiar. Not like a family name, but like one of those surnames that appear on bronze plaques on expensive buildings downtown, on old gates, in local history books. He was not just anyone, and according to the document, that man had had a relationship with his mother, a deep one that had left its mark. Patricia approached and snatched the paper from him. "What is this, Robert?" "I don't know," he replied, although he knew he was lying. She read it in silence, her brow furrowed hard. "You're reading the same thing I am." "Shut up," he told her, lowering his voice. "Don't talk about this here, not in front of the neighbors." The neighbors, indeed, were still watching from afar, some from Donnie's corner store, others from their windows. No one missed what had happened that morning, and now the show continued. "Who was this man?" Patricia insisted. "Why was your mother keeping this?" Robert took a deep breath. He had no answers, only questions, and more of them all the time. But one in particular wouldn't leave him alone. Why had he never known about Ignatius? And why had his mother kept silent all this time? Patricia clumsily folded the paper and put it in her purse. "Let's go. You've made enough of a scene for today." But Robert didn't move. Something inside him resisted. He was bewildered, hurt in his pride, and also, though he wouldn't admit it out loud, he was afraid. Meanwhile, 4 blocks away, Mrs. Estelle walked slowly, dragging the broken suitcase, and with a heart heavier than ever. Every step she took moved her away from the house and also from everything she had built with sacrifice. Every sidewalk square in the neighborhood had its history. Every tree, every concrete bench, every child playing in the street brought back memories. But that day, there was no time for nostalgia, only for resistance. She stopped in front of Mrs. Tony's grocery store. She thought about asking for a glass of water, but seeing the owner's evasive look, she understood she wasn't welcome. She kept walking. People's eyes were like knives that didn't dare to cut, but still hurt. No one approached, no one offered help. And that, for Estelle, hurt more than Robert's words. Because screams are forgotten, but the silence of those who know you, that stays with you. When she reached the intersection with Main Street, she stopped at a bus stop. She sat on the hot metal bench. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt the sun burning her skin. There was no shade, no comfort. Not a single tear fell from her eyes. She was dry of everything. She opened her purse and looked for her medications. One of them was broken, another crushed. She took a pill with trembling fingers and swallowed it dry. From the bottom of the purse, she took out a paper folded in 4. Another document, the real one. The one she had kept for years, without showing it to anyone. Her security. Her last card. She looked at the envelope. It was also signed by Ignatius de la Torre. And it also had a date, 1983. She put the paper away again and took a deep breath. She knew Robert had seen only a part. She knew what he held in his hands was barely the first piece of a puzzle that, once complete, would shake the foundations of everything that family thought they knew. But it wasn't the time. Not yet. A bus stopped in front of her. The driver looked at her in the mirror, waiting to see if she would get on. Estelle shook her head. She didn't know where to go. Not yet. Then she got up with difficulty. She kept walking. There was someone who might be able to give her shelter for a night. Someone she hadn't seen in more than 30 years. But first, she needed to go back to the place where it all began, where she met Ignatius, where her story stopped being just hers. She turned west, toward Nashville, and she didn't know it yet, but someone else was already asking about her. A man in a grey suit, thin, with a leather briefcase and a Midwestern accent. He had arrived in the neighborhood that same morning. He was asking carefully, without giving many details. He only said he was looking for an older woman named Estelle Ramirez, and that he had something she needed to see as soon as possible. No one had told him anything yet, but he already knew too much. The sun continued to climb, and with it, the heat that seeped between the cobblestones of the neighborhood. Shadows were short, and dignity even shorter. Estelle walked aimlessly, driven not by her feet, but by habit. That habit of never stopping, of resisting in silence, of enduring until there was nothing left to swallow. She went with the broken suitcase, dragging it as she dragged the memories of a whole life that suddenly had been denied to her. People watched her pass as if she were a stranger, just another woman with a sad face and clean but poorly ironed clothes. No one could imagine that this woman had sacrificed everything for 3 children who now wouldn't even offer her water. She crossed Liberty Street at a slow pace. Traffic buzzed around her, but she didn't hear it. Her head was full of voices from the past. Those of her children when they were small, running barefoot in the hallway. The laughter of her late husband, although laughter wasn't what she remembered most about him. And above all, the voice of that man she hadn't named again for decades. Ignatius. Turning onto Industry Street, her legs couldn't take it anymore. She sat on a planter next to a closed convenience store. She was thirsty, but she only had a few loose coins at the bottom of her purse. She checked. Not even enough for a bottle of water. While she tried to compose herself, a little girl playing with a ball looked at her. She watched her for a few seconds. Then she ran toward her mother, who was standing at the door of a small diner. "Mom, why is that grandma crying?" "She's not crying, sweetie. She's just resting. Come on, come here." Estelle was crying. Inside. That kind of dry crying that doesn't wet the eyes, but floods everything else. A lump in her throat, a pressure in her chest, a feeling of loss that she wouldn't even know how to explain if someone asked her. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. She didn't have a plan. She only had a name that wouldn't leave her head. Carla, her friend from youth. Her silent accomplice from those years she sometimes said when things started to go wrong. The last person who had told her, "If something ever happens to you, look me up." But more than 30 years had passed. Would she still be alive? Would she still be living in the same house over in the San Andreas neighborhood? She didn't know, but it was her only option. She slowly stood up. Her bones creaked. Some women sweeping the sidewalk looked at her and whispered among themselves. Estelle ignored them. It no longer hurt her that they talked behind her back. What hurt was that her own children had closed the door in her face. That hurt, like a dagger in the soul. A few blocks away, in front of the Old Town Market, she stopped again. She remembered how many times she had walked through there carrying bags with her children by the hand, buying just enough to feed them. She remembered how the money was stretched, how the time was stretched, how she stretched herself until she broke. The past didn't come in order, it came in waves, and every place she passed brought a new memory. Like that day, Robert fell on the corner and cut his eyebrow. She carried him in her arms to the nearest doctor's office. She waited for hours with him in her lap, singing softly so he wouldn't cry. And now that same boy, that same man, had thrown her out as if she had never meant anything. She kept walking. She went up Javier Mina Street, dodging closed stalls and open trash bags. In the distance, the murmur of country music musicians practicing in an apartment building could be heard. The sound of an old steel guitar stirred something in her chest. She knew that song. Ignatius had hummed it once, in a light rain, when they were walking through Nashville. Ignatius. How dare that name return now? She pressed her lips together and continued. She crossed Revolution Avenue and took the street where Carla lived, or where she had lived. She no longer remembered clearly. Everything looked the same, but different. The facades had more paint, but the glances were still just as cold. When she reached the corner, she saw the house, number 1527. She knocked on the gate. She waited. Nothing. She knocked again, this time with more force. "Yes?" a woman's voice answered from inside. Estelle immediately recognized that tone. It was her, no doubt. It was Carla. The voice was deeper, slower, more tired, but it was her friend. "It's me?" Estelle said, in a voice barely audible. "Who?" "Estelle. Estelle Ramirez." There was a long silence, then footsteps, then the creak of the lock. The gate opened and Carla appeared, in a housecoat, and her eyes narrowed against the sun. They looked at each other. 40 years fit into those seconds of silence. And then Carla hugged her. They didn't say anything. The hug said everything. She ushered her inside, offered her water, prepared her some tea. She asked what had happened, but Estelle didn't speak right away. She just said, "I need to rest." Carla prepared a room for her with an old but clean mattress. She left a blanket and closed the door carefully. Estelle lay down, looking at the ceiling. She didn't know if she would sleep or if her mind would allow her that rest. But at least for the first time in days, she wasn't alone. However, what neither she nor Carla knew was that that same night, someone else would knock on that door. And they weren't coming to offer comfort. They were coming for answers, and they wouldn't leave without them. Carla wasn't one for hugging. She never was. She was a woman of strong character, a direct gaze, and a sharp tongue. But that day, when she opened the door and saw Estelle standing in front of her house after so many years, time trembled between her fingers. They hugged without words, as if what wasn't said in 3 decades could fit into a single gesture. Estelle, exhausted, trembling, felt in that moment that she wasn't falling because someone was finally holding her up. Carla ushered her inside. She prepared her some chamomile tea with honey. She warmed up some tortillas and put refried beans on the table. She didn't ask anything at first. She just let her eat. She just watched her. With moist eyes, but without letting it show in her voice. After a few minutes, when the silence was getting too long, Carla spoke. "What happened, Estelle?" Estelle swallowed. She didn't answer immediately. The cup trembled in her hands. Carla leaned closer and placed a hand on her wrist. "You don't have to tell me everything now, but if you came here, it's because you had nowhere else to go." Estelle looked up. "They threw me out, Carla. Robert, my son, told me I was in the way. He kicked me out with my suitcase and everything, in front of everyone, as if I were a nobody." "My God," Carla murmured, pressing her lips together. "It wasn't just him," Estelle continued, her voice flat. Patricia, too. And the others? They were silent. None of them said anything. None of them objected. None of them defended me. And your grandchildren? They weren't allowed to come out. They were locked in their room. They were listening from the window, but they didn't come down. The silence returned. Carla swallowed her own anger dryly. She took her friend's cup and got up to heat more water for her. Estelle looked around. The house was the same floral curtains, the same framed picture of the Virgin of Guadalupe on the wall. Everything had the smell of the past, that aroma of cinnamon, old wood, and faith. I didn't know if you'd still be here, Estelle said. I thought maybe you had already left. Maybe you wouldn't be here anymore. I'm still here, Carla replied from the kitchen, more wrinkled, more tired. But I'm still here. Thank you for letting me in. Don't be silly, this is your house. It always was. That night, Carla prepared the back room, a bed with a foam mattress, 2 pillows, and a thick blanket. She left a clean towel and a glass of water on the nightstand. Estelle lay down without saying anything else. She didn't need many words. Her body weighed on her as if she were carrying a lifetime on her shoulders. But she didn't sleep. The lights were off. The fan was spinning slowly on the ceiling, and the silence was thick. But in her mind, the voices kept screaming. Those of her children, those of her mother, who so many years ago had warned her to keep silent. Those of Ignatius, with that deep, sweet tone, so different from the other men she knew. She closed her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to clearly remember Ignatius's face when he told her, "If something happens to me, tell Robert the truth." The day he gave her that envelope, the handwriting he used to write everything, and her, hiding it out of fear, out of shame, to protect. Who? Him, her son, herself. Dawn found her with her eyes open. Outside, the street was quiet. Only the distant dogs could be heard occasionally, a motorcycle passing at full speed, and the faint hum of the sleeping city. And then, around 5 o'clock in the morning, Carla gently knocked on the door. "Estelle? Someone's at the gate." Estelle sat up in bed, bewildered. "Who?" "I don't know. It's a man. Well-dressed. He says he's from a law office downtown, that he needs to talk to you. Urgently." Estelle slowly got out of bed, her heart pounding like a drum. "Did he say his name?" "No, but he has a briefcase and a card with your full name on it." Estelle was silent. She knew this was going to happen. The moment had arrived. She walked toward the living room, barefoot, dragging her feet. Carla was standing behind the door, peering through the crack. "What do you want to do?" Carla asked. "Open it." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I have nothing left to lose." The gate opened slowly. The man, in a grey suit, well-combed hair, a serious expression, took a step forward and extended the card. "Mrs. Estelle Ramirez Jimenez?" "Yes, that's me." "My name is Arthur Mendizabal. I'm an attorney with the Mendez and Associates law firm. I've come to give you something that has been waiting for you for more than 40 years. Estelle swallowed. "From whom?" The man looked at her intently. "From Mr. Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez." In the lawyer's hand, the metallic corner of a black briefcase stood out. Inside, a sealed envelope, a legal document, and something else. Something that was about to change everything. Estelle didn't remember feeling a silence as thick as the one that followed the man's words. Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. The name floated in the air like a ghost she thought she had buried decades ago, but it wasn't dead, not entirely, not if someone else pronounced it. Not if that name now came accompanied by a lawyer, a law firm, and documents saved for more than 40 years. Carla remained by her side, mute, her hand still on the gate. Her eyes went from Estelle's face to the young lawyer's, and then back. The only thing that broke the tension was the distant hum of a bus starting up on the parallel street. "May we come in?" Mr. Mendizabal asked in a respectful but firm tone. Estelle took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, come in." Arthur crossed the gate and entered the small living room. He carried a dark leather briefcase, impeccably closed. He sat on the edge of the sofa, his back straight, his hands clasped on his knees. Estelle remained standing. "What is it you've come to tell me?" she asked bluntly. "Mrs. Estelle, first of all, let me tell you that this is not a legal notice or a simple procedure. What I'm about to show you was a direct instruction from my client, many years ago, and it was delivered to our office with the sole condition that only you could receive it, no one else." "Ignatius?" "That's right. He left everything in our hands in the year 1983, just before, well, his passing." Estelle slowly sat down. Carla placed herself next to her, without saying a word, but with glistening eyes. She didn't ask, but she knew she was witnessing something much bigger than she imagined. The lawyer opened the briefcase. He took out a manila envelope sealed with red wax, then a black folder with gold edges, also sealed, and finally a small wooden box the size of a notepad. These 3 objects were delivered to the Mendez and Associates law firm under my personal safekeeping. I was young when Mr. Ignatius arrived. He instructed me clearly, "When Mrs. Estelle comes, or when you find her, deliver this without questions." And why now? No one could find you. We searched for years. We knew you had left Nashville. We knew that, after your sudden disappearance, no one saw you again, until now. Estelle took the manila envelope with trembling hands. She carefully broke the seal. Inside was a letter. She recognized it immediately. The firm handwriting, the elegant stroke, the smell of old paper that she knew so well. The letter said, "Estelle, if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you, and because the time has come for you to know that I never left you alone. Never. Everything I couldn't give you in life, I prepared it. Not out of guilt or pity, but because it was yours all along. I ask you, please, to tell Robert the truth. Don't let him leave this world without knowing who his true father was. The rest I leave in your hands. Ignatius." Estelle dropped the letter and covered her mouth. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only closed her eyes and leaned forward, as if her soul had slipped out of her body. Carla hugged her by the shoulders. "What does all this mean, Estelle?" But Estelle didn't answer. The lawyer opened the black folder. "Here are notarial documents, property transfers, bank records, even Mr. Ignatius's original will. But I can't give you this without your signature. I need you to accompany me to the office to formalize it. It's in your name. No one else can claim it." Estelle didn't know what to think, or what to feel. For years she had lived with the burden of silence, with the guilt of having hidden the truth, with the fear of what would happen if the past returned. And now, the past was sitting in her living room, in a suit and tie, with legal seals and words like property and will. "I need a few days," she murmured. "I understand," the lawyer said, standing up. "There's no rush, but you should know that this cannot remain hidden much longer. There are important names in these papers, people who will want to prevent this from coming to light." "Like who?" "Alfonso de la Torre, Ignatius's brother. He never accepted the relationship, and when his brother died, he inherited everything that you should have received. Carla put her hand to her chest. That man is still alive. And very well, but not for long. The lawyer closed the briefcase. I'll leave you my card. As soon as you're ready, call me. But be careful, madam. Someone else already knows you've appeared. We don't know who tipped them off, but Alfonso is moving. Estelle squeezed the letter between her fingers. She knew this wasn't going to end with just an envelope. She knew that now silence was no longer an option. And she knew, more than ever, that before moving forward, she would have to return to the place where it all began. The tailor shop, Juarez Street in the heart of Nashville, where she saw Ignatius for the first time, where everything began. The tailor shop where Estelle worked was on a narrow, bustling street in Nashville, right behind the Parian Market. It was a modest place, with a peeling wooden door and a metal curtain that they rarely lowered. Inside, 3 sewing machines lined up, a long cutting table, and an old radio that almost always played blues music. She was 21 years old when she started there. Thin, with her hair tied back in a tight braid and her gaze always lowered. She was good, quick with her hands, patient with details. Mrs. Dell, Angela, the owner of the place, entrusted her with the most difficult jobs: hems on expensive dresses, alterations for nervous brides, invisible men's for evening gowns. One Thursday afternoon, while it was raining lightly on the metal roofs, a man entered carrying a bag of clothes on his left arm and a wet umbrella in his right. He wore a burgundy suit, polished Italian shoes, and a look that was nothing like that of the shop's usual customers. "Do you fix fine clothing here?" he asked, with a measured but firm tone. "Depends on how fine," Mrs. Angela replied without looking up from the machine. Estelle, seeing him, felt something in her stomach flip. It wasn't fear, it was something else, a mix of nerves and curiosity that she couldn't explain. The man took out a white linen shirt, wrinkled and torn on the side. "The seatbelt in my car did this. It's new. My wife gave it to me yesterday. I don't want the seam to show." "Leave it to my girl," Angela said, pointing to Estelle. "She has finer hands than a French seamstress." He approached, handing her the garment carefully. "What's your name?" "Estelle." "Nice to meet you, Estelle. I'm Ignatius de la Torre." And there, in that first sentence, without her knowing it, everything began. During the following weeks, Ignatius returned with more clothes. Sometimes he brought shirts with loose buttons, pants with poorly done hems, and even jackets that didn't even need fixing. She noticed it, but didn't say anything, because each visit was accompanied by a smile and a long gaze, which lingered even after he left. "That man is not from around here," Carla told her one afternoon when she went to visit her. "Did you see the watch he's wearing? It's worth more than my aunt's house." "I don't care what it's worth," Estelle replied. "He treats me with respect." People who want to use you do that too, but Estelle didn't answer, because inside her, something was opening, a new crack through which a light she had never felt was seeping in. One day, Ignatius waited until the shop closed. "Can I buy you a coffee?" She hesitated, looked around. No one was watching them. Just for a little while. They went to a small coffee shop near downtown. He ordered black coffee. She ordered hers with milk and a little cinnamon. They talked little, but when they said goodbye, Ignatius held her hand for a few seconds longer than necessary. "You have eyes that don't match the sadness you carry," he told her. Estelle didn't sleep that night. The outings became more frequent. Ignatius rented a modest house in Antioch, where they spent their afternoons talking, cooking, listening to music. He never rushed her, never forced her. But the affection grew like the roots of a hidden plant, slowly, deeply, and strongly. Estelle fell in love without asking for it, without wanting it, without planning it. And one day, when the summer heat became unbearable and the streets smelled of wet earth, Ignatius confessed something that would change everything. "I'm married, Estelle." She lowered her head. "I know," she replied, her voice muted. "My wife can't have children. We tried for many years. I didn't want this for you, but I also don't know how to stay away." Estelle felt a pang in her chest, but she didn't cry. She didn't leave, because what they had, though hidden, was more real than everything she had lived before. Weeks later, Estelle knew she was pregnant. She found out one morning when the smell of freshly baked bread on the corner made her vomit. She bought some ginger tea at the market, but it didn't help. By the second month, there was no doubt. Ignatius took the news in silence. They sat in the house in Antioch, under the shade of a bougainvillea, and he told her, "I'm going to take responsibility. I don't want that child to lack anything. He is my son, and you are the only family I have. And your wife? She can't know. And me? How am I going to explain it?" Ignatius was silent. He handed her a sealed envelope. "If something happens to me, if I disappear, if they silence me, if someone tries to harm you, open this. Only if necessary." Estelle took it without asking questions, and that same night, she decided she would say the child was Julian's, the guy she was dating before meeting Ignatius, a rough, quiet man who worked in construction and who had already asked her to marry him. A lie that would change the destiny of everyone, and that once told could never be undone. Days later, Ignatius hugged her tightly for the last time. "No matter what happens, Estelle, that child will be my blood." But when she returned to the tailor shop, Mrs. Angela had already received an anonymous call. "You can't stay here, Estelle. I got into trouble for letting you use this place for your affairs. You have to leave." And so, in a matter of weeks, Estelle lost her job, her reputation, and the love of her life, without knowing that the worst was yet to come. Estelle's hands weren't trembling, her soul was. Her body still responded, her back was still straight, her eyes firm, but inside she was falling apart. Her belly grew, her heart shrunk, and her silence became, every day more, a prison that she herself had locked. Saying the child was Julian's was not an impulsive decision, it was pure desperation. It was that, or seeing her life destroyed by gossip, by the moral condemnation of a small town, and the fury of a powerful family. Julian didn't ask many questions. Estelle told him she was pregnant. He took a while to answer. He lit a cigarette, spat on the ground, and after a few seconds grunted. "Well, what can you do? I guess he's mine." "Yes, of course he's yours," she replied, feeling guilt stab her chest. "I'm just telling you one thing," he added, with the cigarette dangling from his lips. "I'm not good with kids. If I marry you, I don't want crying all day, or anyone bothering me while I'm at the shop." Estelle lowered her gaze. It wasn't love. It never was. But it was the only way out she had. A man with a steady job, no questions asked, no heavy surname, a shield, a disguise. They got married civilly in a grey office downtown. There was no church ceremony, no white dress, no flowers, just signatures, unknown witnesses, and a silent promise not to stir up the past. She didn't tell Ignatius. She distanced herself. She stopped going to the house in Antioch. She changed her number. She hid. She thought that way she would protect him. She thought that way she would erase him. But she couldn't. He appeared a month later, looking for her everywhere. He found her leaving the market with a bag of tomatoes and another of cloth diapers. He looked at her as if the air had been snatched from him. What did you do? What I had to do? And my son? He is not your son. The phrase came out without soul. It wasn't true, and he knew it. Estelle, Ignatius whispered, don't do this to me. She didn't answer. She only looked at him, with watery eyes and a shattered soul. And then she left. That was the last time she saw him. The following months were a thick fog. Julian was not violent, but he was cruel. His indifference cut deeper than a shout. He worked long hours and came back late, smelling of beer and grease. He didn't talk. He just turned on the television and fell asleep on the couch. Estelle's pregnancy was lonely. No caresses on her belly, no sweet words, no shared illusion, only nights of insomnia, tired feet, and a broken heart that refused to heal. Robert was born in a public hospital, without flowers, without visitors, without a present father. Julian arrived 2 days later, left a box of milk and a pack of diapers, and left without even holding the baby. Even so, Estelle looked at him as the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life. He had Ignatius's eyes, the broad forehead, the strong chin, and a way of crying that seemed like a complaint from the cradle. They registered him with Julian's last name, Ramirez, without knowing that behind that paper hid a story that one day, sooner or later, would want to come out. Over the years, Estelle learned to live with the lie. She raised Robert with love, with dedication. She taught him to read, to pray, to respect his elders. She did the impossible so that he would lack nothing. And in every gesture, in every kiss, in every lunchbox she prepared before he went to school, she felt Ignatius's presence, silent, painful, constant. But the lie was heavy. It weighed more and more. Sometimes, Estelle would lock herself in the bathroom and take out the envelope Ignatius had left her. She would look at it. She would caress it. She wondered if one day she would have the courage to open it. And she didn't, because she knew that inside there wasn't just a paper. There was a mirror, and in that mirror she would have to look at herself without excuses. The years passed. Julian remained absent. Robert grew up. 2 more children were born, children who were Julian's, and who, to Estelle's surprise, received a little more affection from their father. She never understood why. Maybe Julian sensed something. Maybe he knew Robert wasn't his, although he never said it. But the treatment was different. Colder, more distant, and Estelle lived divided. She loved her children, all of them, but she watched over Robert with a silent intensity, with a guilt she couldn't erase. She hid his origin, his true name, his true father. She thought she was doing it to protect him, but deep down, she was also protecting herself from the shame, the rage, the scandal. Until one day life caught up with her. Ignatius died. She was notified by a brief letter, without details, without explanations. It said he had been in a highway accident, that the car had rolled over, that the body was recognized by his brother. There was no funeral. There was no farewell. Estelle kept that letter along with the envelope Ignatius had left her, and that night, after putting the children to bed, she locked herself in the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it. But what she found inside was not just a confession. It was a warning, one that would chill her blood for years and that would very soon knock on her door. Estelle took several minutes to read the entire letter. Ignatius had written clearly, like someone who knows they are running out of time, like someone who has lived surrounded by enemies and has to hide every word under 7 locks. It was not a romantic letter. It was not a farewell. It was a warning. It said that if something happened to him, not to trust his brother Alfonso, not to let him take control of his assets, his decisions, or his legacy. That Estelle should keep that letter and protect her son with it. That one day someone would come for him. If I die in an accident, it was not an accident. Those words stabbed her in the stomach like knives. She sat on the bed with trembling legs, her eyes fixed on the paper, and her chest heaving. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Outside, the children slept. Julian was snoring on the couch. The house was in shadow, and inside it a hurricane had begun. She hid the letter under the loose floorboards of the closet, along with the one notifying her of his death. She lay down and closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. Because although Ignatius was gone, what he had sown continued to grow, invisible, underground. Months passed. Life became a cold, uneventful routine. Julian remained absent, cold, without affection. Robert grew up strong, intelligent, curious. Estelle tried to avoid comparisons, but sometimes, when she looked at him in profile, a sigh escaped her. He had the same expression Ignatius had when he was angry, the same furrowed brow, the same way of biting his lip when concentrating. The other two children, products of her union with Julian, were different, more withdrawn, more nervous. The atmosphere at home was heavy, full of silences, of unsaid things, of shared but unlived spaces. A year after Ignatius's death, the unthinkable happened. Julian didn't come home one night. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes he stayed out drinking with his colleagues from the workshop. But this time he didn't let anyone know. He didn't call. He didn't return the next day. They found him 2 days later, on the outskirts of Murfreesboro, on a dusty dirt road, inside his truck, with an empty whiskey bottle on the seat and a blow to the head that, they said, was from a fall when he tripped. Estelle received the news in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't ask many questions. She only went to identify the body, signed the papers, and returned alone on public transportation, with the children asleep on her lap. No one investigated anything. No one questioned how a man who barely drank could end up dead with an empty bottle and a wound on his temple. No one connected his death with Ignatius's. But Estelle did. She didn't say anything. Not to the family, not to the neighbors, not even to Carla, who showed up with chicken soup and donuts for the wake. She only thought about one thing, Alfonso. From then on, her world became survival. A widow with 3 small children, without a trade or stable income, Estelle had to clean houses, wash other people's clothes, cook to order, embroider secretly in the early hours of the morning. She ate just enough not to faint, slept just enough to stay on her feet, and yet she never complained. She never allowed herself the luxury of collapsing. Robert started working at 14. He was serious, reserved, and with a pride that sometimes oozed from his pores. Estelle raised him with firmness, with sacrifice, and with that silent love that is stronger than hugs. But every time he asked about his father, she answered the same. He was a hard worker but cold. You are more like me. They never talked about Ignatius, never about the letter, never about anything that couldn't be seen, touched, or hidden. The years kept passing. One afternoon, while cooking tamales to sell in the St. Sebastian Town Square, Estelle heard a last name on the radio that froze her blood. Mr. Alfonso de la Torre y Vasquez, Tennessee businessman, will receive a state government recognition this Thursday for his career as an investor in the real estate sector. The spoon fell from her hand. The boiling oil splattered her wrist, but she didn't react. She only thought about that. He was still alive, rich, intact, reputable, and she was still silent. That night, when the children were asleep, she went to the closet, took out the loose board, and read Ignatius's letter again. The words were no longer a warning. They were destiny. She knew she couldn't keep that secret forever. that sooner or later Alfonso would seek to clean up his history, and to do so he would have to erase her. But it wasn't time yet. She wasn't ready yet. She still couldn't face the past. Not until she saw what her son would become. The same one who, without knowing it, was about to repeat the history she so wanted to avoid. Robert had always felt that something didn't quite fit. Since childhood, he realized that his father's treatment of him was different from what his brothers received. Julian was sparse with everyone, yes, but with him there was a particular coldness, a distance that he didn't know how to name. He never hit him, he never yelled at him, but he never hugged him either, and in a house where love was already scarce, that was noticed as a huge void. Over the years, Robert became a reserved, proper young man, with a strong sense of duty. He worked from an early age, helped in whatever way he could, and avoided conflicts. But there was something inside him, something that pushed him to seek answers, questions that no one dared to ask, not even him. When Julian died, Robert was 15 years old. They held the wake in a small funeral home in the neighborhood, with weak coffee and artificial flowers. Estelle stood all the time with a lost look, without a single tear. Robert thought it was out of strength, but now he knew there was something more behind those dry eyes. Years passed, and Ignatius's name disappeared from the home, or rather, it was never pronounced. It wasn't a topic. It didn't exist. Until that day when Robert, now an adult, found the envelope dropped next to the sidewalk. The handwriting, the name, the last name, Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. He had heard that last name only once in his life. It was at a business dinner, years ago, when an important partner mentioned the de la Torre brothers, the ones with the land down south. Robert didn't pay attention, but now that memory returned like a dry flash of lightning in his head. There was something there, something hidden, something his mother never said, and he was going to find out. During the following nights, Robert dedicated himself to searching the internet for everything related to Ignatius de la Torre. He discovered that he had died in a car accident in 1983, that he had owned several properties, and that his brother Alfonso inherited everything. He also found old notes in digital newspaper archives, small society articles, brief interviews, isolated mentions. Ignatius was discreet, but he had power. He appeared as a benefactor of a school, as an anonymous donor to a hospital, as an investor in art projects, and nowhere was a wife or children mentioned. What caught his attention the most was a clipping from the Memphis Journal newspaper, where Alfonso appeared as the sole heir to the deceased businessman's assets. The note spoke of a silent dispute within the family, but without details, only rumors. Robert printed everything, put it in a blue folder. He didn't tell Patricia anything, nor his brothers. He only watched his mother in silence, waiting for her to speak, but Estelle continued to behave as always, helpful, quiet, present, but distant. One morning, as he walked to work, a man in a dark suit walked alongside him on the sidewalk. He had perfectly combed hair, a small briefcase under his arm, and an educated, almost affable tone of voice. "Excuse me, are you Robert Ramirez?" Robert looked at him suspiciously. "Yes? Who's asking?" "I work with Mr. Alfonso de la Torre. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes, about your mother." Robert's heart skipped a beat. "My mother? What does my mother have to do with—" "Don't be alarmed. We just need to confirm a couple of facts. Nothing official for now, but sensitive." "What kind of facts?" "About her origins, her past relationships, her close circle during the 1980s, especially in Nashville." Robert felt his mouth go dry. And why would Alfonso de la Torre be interested in that? The man smiled, but without warmth. "Let's just say there are unresolved family matters. and it's better to prevent than to regret. Are you threatening my mother? Not at all. We just want to avoid confusion. The man took out a card. He extended it. When you're ready, call me. But remember, there are truths that are better left undisturbed. Not all secrets need to be discovered. He left without saying anything else. Robert stood there for a few seconds with the card in his hand and a whirlwind in his head. That man knew something, and it wasn't insignificant. When he got home that night, he saw Estelle in the backyard, folding clothes. He watched her for a long time, with a mixture of anger, tenderness, and confusion. He wanted to ask her. He wanted to confront her. But something stopped him, because for the first time he was afraid of the answer. That same night, in another part of the city, Alfonso was talking on the phone from his office. We've contacted him. He's smart. He won't trust us right away. And what if he starts asking too many questions? Then we'll take care of him, like we did with his father. On the other side of the line, the voice didn't respond. It just hung up. And on Alfonso's desk, next to a Mont Blanc pen and a half-finished whiskey, rested an old black and white photograph. In it, a young man, Ignatius, smiled, hugging a woman with a timid gaze, Estelle. And on the back, written in smeared ink, it read, "My only mistake was not protecting her more." The enemy's presence was no longer a suspicion, it was a shadow. And it was getting closer. The next morning began like any other. The sound of the garbage truck passed punctually at 6:30. The bells of the bakery on the corner announced that there were hot rolls, and Carla, as usual, was already sweeping the sidewalk in her floral housecoat and the scowl she always wore when she had to go out without makeup. Estelle got up with a heavy body, as if she hadn't slept. In reality, she had slept little, but it was her soul that couldn't find rest. Since the lawyer Mendizabal appeared with Ignatius's letter, since she saw those sealed documents with names she had avoided for so long, her life had taken an internal turn. She didn't show it. She kept speaking with the same serene voice. She kept folding the clothes with precision, but inside her, something had been activated. Fear. It wasn't fear of Alfonso. It was fear that everything she had kept for decades would come to light, in the worst way. That same morning, while she finished making the bed in the room where she slept at Carla's house, someone knocked on the gate. It wasn't just any knock. It was slow, firm, 3 spaced knocks. Carla was the first to peek out. "Who is it?" she yelled with that "don't mess with me" lady's voice. "Good morning. I'm looking for Mrs. Estelle Ramirez," a man said with an educated tone, but without a hint of warmth. Estelle listened from inside and froze. "Who's asking?" Carla replied. "I was sent by Mr. Alfonso de la Torre. I just want to deliver something personally. It won't take more than 5 minutes." Estelle slowly came out. Carla looked at her with an alarmed expression. "Don't open it," she whispered. "That name, I don't like it." But Estelle, against all logic, walked to the gate. The man was young, dressed in a suit, perfectly combed. He didn't look like a thug or a bill collector or a government official, but he didn't look like just a messenger either. "Are you Mrs. Estelle Ramirez?" "Yes." "My name is Maurice. I just have an errand. Mr. Alfonso wants you to remain silent, not to stir up things from the past, not to seek justice where there is no trace left." Estelle looked at him with serenity. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's advice. But I must also warn you that if you insist on stirring up the past, there will be consequences. Not for you," he paused for a long time, "but for your son." That phrase was like a knife to the throat. Carla came out in a fury. "Get out of here, you wretched man! Who do you think you are?" This isn't a politician's bar. It's my house." The man was unfazed. He took an envelope from his jacket pocket and dropped it into the mailbox. "Read it carefully. We are not playing around." And he walked away without looking back. Estelle didn't move. Carla pulled her by the arm and took her inside. "What was that? Who is that man? Why is he looking for your son?" Estelle was trembling. She sat down slowly and put her hands to her face. Carla looked at her with fury, with anguish, with a mixture of helplessness that she could no longer contain. "Estelle, enough. You have to tell me everything, not just what you think I can understand. Everything. Who is Alfonso? What does Robert have to do with this?" Estelle didn't speak. She only walked to the envelope in the mailbox, took it out with trembling hands, and opened it on the kitchen table. Inside was a sheet of paper with official letterhead, unsigned, just a phrase typed on it. "Some truths can cost more than a lifetime of silence. The fate of your family depends on you." That night, Robert returned to Carla's house. He couldn't stay at home. The tension with Patricia was unbearable. His brothers wouldn't look him in the face. His mind was a whirlwind of suspicions, names, documents, and unanswered questions. When he entered, he saw his mother sitting in the living room with the envelope in her hands. What is that? A warning. From whom? Estelle looked at him with heavy eyes. From someone who wants me to keep quiet. And you? Are you going to do it? She was silent for a few seconds. I don't know, Robert. Not for me. For you. You don't know what's at stake. Robert approached. He sat in front of her. He looked at her firmly. Mum, I need to know the truth, no matter what it is, no matter who it destroys. If you don't tell me, I'm going to look for it on my own. Estelle pressed her lips together. Carla, who was watching them from the kitchen, didn't say anything. Then Robert took out the card the man had given him a few days earlier from his backpack. He left it on the table. Estelle recognized it immediately. That man already came. This morning. He told me the same thing you're saying now. And what do you want to do? She swallowed. Call the lawyer, the one who came with Ignatius's documents, and open everything. Are you sure? No, but it's no longer about me. It's about you. And when Carla approached with 3 cups of coffee and placed them on the table, no one said anything else, because in that moment, everyone knew that the storm had begun. But no one imagined what was about to come out of that chest, locked for more than 40 years. And also, who else was willing to prevent it? At all costs. Patricia wasn't stupid. She never was. What she was observant. Quiet, yes, but with her eyes open. And for several days she had noticed something strange about Robert. He came back later, talked less, ate without really tasting the food, and had that expression that is only seen on the faces of men who are about to commit an act of folly or discover a truth. That morning, while Robert was showering and the children were at school, Patricia entered the room Estelle had used while she lived with them. It was already empty. The sheets folded, the pillows stacked, the closet open. But she knew that the real stories are not hidden in the obvious. She slowly opened the drawers. She checked carefully. Nothing, only a rosary, a small picture of St. Jude, and a bag with buttons and needles. But when she bent down, she noticed something she had never seen before. A false bottom in the bottom drawer of the closet. An old wooden board with a small indentation on one side. She put her fingers in. She pulled. What she found there wasn't just a notebook. It was a diary, with thick, dark brown covers, worn edges, and pages yellowed by time. She opened it carefully. Estelle's handwriting was elegant, firm, very different from the hurried handwriting on shopping lists or notes in the kitchen. The first page said, "If someone ever finds this, do not judge me until you read the last word." Patricia swallowed. She slowly turned the pages, almost afraid of what she was about to read. She did it sitting on the floor, cross-legged, as if she were a child peering through her grandmother's letters. But every line she read took her further away from the image she had of Estelle, and closer to another she never would have imagined. She read about Ignatius, about how she met him, about the secret meetings at the Antioch house, about the pregnancy, about the decision to marry Julian to protect Robert, and then she came to a stained page, as if she had cried while writing it. "I never could tell him Julian wasn't his father. I was afraid of losing him, of him hating me, of Ignatius not coming back. But I was wrong. Silence kills too, sometimes slower, but deeper." Patricia was silent for a long time. Then she closed the diary and took it to her room. She hid it among her things. She didn't say anything that night, or the next day, or the following week. But what she had read had left its mark, not only because of the story, but because, unintentionally, she had discovered that her mother-in-law was more human than she thought, and that her husband was living a lie so big that any attempt to uncover it could completely destroy him. Days later, Robert returned home later than usual. He was exhausted, his face haggard, his shirt wrinkled. Patricia was waiting for him at the dining room table with her arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said bluntly. "Now, I'm beat." "Now," she repeated, and her tone didn't allow for discussion. Robert sat down, resigned. "What's wrong?" She went straight to the point. "I know about Ignatius de la Torre." He blinked. He tensed up. "What did you say?" "I read your mother's diary. I found it in the room." The silence was absolute. Robert abruptly stood up, but didn't speak. He took a few steps, then stopped. He sat down again. "And what do you think?" Patricia didn't answer right away. She just looked at him. "I think your mother has carried too many things alone, and that you haven't realized anything." "Are you defending her?" "I'm saying you don't know who you are, and before you keep blaming her, you should ask yourself why she never told you." "Because she knew it was a mistake," he replied without looking at her. "No, because she was protecting you. From your father, from his brother, from everyone." Robert lowered his head. His hands were clenched on the table. "So Ignatius was my real father?" "Yes." "And if what the diary says is true?" "Alfonso had something to do with his death." The air became heavy. Robert felt as if his whole world had shifted a foot to the side. Nothing fit anymore. Everything he had believed, everything he had judged about his mother, now had a different color, a different background, a different weight. "What are you going to do?" Patricia asked. "Patricia," Robert didn't answer. He slowly stood up, went into his room, and closed the door without making a sound. That same night, while everyone slept, the lawyer Mendizabal received an encrypted message on his cell phone. "Confirmed, the daughter-in-law has the diary. They're going to talk. Take precautions." Minutes later, in an elegant building in Providencia, Alfonso de la Torre looked out the window of his office while putting out his cigarette. "They are speeding up," he said in a low voice. "We are going to have to move first." On the other side of the desk, a man in a dark suit nodded his head. "What are the instructions, Counselor?" "Find the convent. If what she wrote is true, they must have something else there. And the family? Keep an eye on them, very closely. And if necessary, get your hands dirty." The man stood up without saying a word. Meanwhile, in a modest house in the Queen's neighborhood, Patricia kept the diary under her pillow unaware that what she held in her hands was not just a story. It was proof, a threat, and also a bomb about to explode. The atmosphere in Robert and Patricia's house became dense, as if the air was full of questions no one wanted to ask, but that everyone felt vibrating under their skin. Since Patricia confessed to reading Estelle's diary, the silences between them became longer and heavier. They didn't fight, but they didn't look at each other the same way either. It wasn't anger that floated between them. It was uncertainty, and sometimes that is more dangerous than rage. Robert left early with his head down, avoiding his wife, his children, his own reflection in the mirror. He knew he couldn't keep postponing it. He had to confront his mother. He had to know the complete truth, not just the parts that were already burning inside him. But before he took that step, someone else would do it for him. David, Robert's eldest son, was a naturally curious boy. He was attending high school at a technical school and had a special talent for technology. He was always immersed in his laptop, editing videos, learning things, looking for answers to questions that even his teachers couldn't answer. One afternoon, he overheard his parents arguing in low voices. He couldn't understand much, but he caught two words that sparked his doubt: Ignatius and father. He didn't say anything. That night, while Patricia was sound asleep and Robert hadn't returned from work yet, David carefully entered his parents' room. He searched through the drawers, through the folders, and finally under the mattress, as he had seen in movies. There he found it. The diary. He didn't waste any time opening it. He read it without haste, with wide eyes and a pounding heart. Each page made him feel more confused, more angry, closer to something he didn't fully understand. He finished reading at dawn. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think of anything else. The next morning, as they were having breakfast, he dropped the bomb without warning. "Dad? Who was your father, really?" Robert looked at him as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown on him. "What are you saying?" "I read Grandma's diary," David replied firmly. "Everything. About Ignatius, about Julian, about the convent, about the accident. Everything." Patricia dropped her coffee cup to the floor. The shattering of the ceramic was not as loud as the one Robert felt in his chest. "What else did you read?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Enough to know that this family is built on a lie." "It's not a lie," Patricia said, trying to calm him. "It's a story that was never told." "And why not?" David insisted. "Why did everyone hide it?" Robert got up from the table, his eyes clouded. "Because it hurt, David. Because it wasn't easy." "And is it easy now?" the boy countered. "Now that I know my grandmother was treated like trash, that you are not who you thought you were, that this Alfonso guy might have killed Ignatius and Julian." The name Alfonso dropped like lead in the air. Robert slowly turned around. "Where did you hear that name?" "In the diary, and in the newspaper clippings you have in your blue folder. I read those too. I know you're investigating and I want to help." Patricia didn't say anything. She only watched her son with a mixture of fear and pride. Robert sat down again, defeated. "I don't know where to start." "By talking to Grandma," David said, "and by going to the convent." "The convent?" "Yes. The diary mentions a convent in Franklin, Tennessee. It says she was institutionalized there, hidden after you were born. Maybe they know something else." Robert rubbed his eyes. He had tried to keep everything under control, but now, even his son was involved in this, and he couldn't allow them to drag him in. "I don't want you to get more involved, David." Too late. That same night, Estelle received an unexpected call. It was Robert. "I need to see you," he said bluntly. Tomorrow. Alone. We have to talk about everything. Everything? Yes, about Ignatius, about Julian, about you, about me. Estelle didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. I'll wait for you at Carla's house at 10. He hung up. Carla, who was in the kitchen, looked at her with concern. Is everything okay? I don't know, but I think there's no going back. Meanwhile, in an elegant restaurant in downtown Nashville, Alfonso de la Torre was sharing a glass of wine with a retired judge. Tomorrow they'll go to the convent, Alfonso said with a calm smile. Let them find whatever they want. The nuns have been warned. They won't say a word. And if they insist, then it's time to move the next piece. The next day, before Robert arrived to see Estelle, two men in a dark car parked in front of Santa Clara Convent in Franklin, Tennessee. One of them got out, with a folder in his hand. He entered through the side door, the one used for discreet visitors. No one saw him, but one of the sisters, old and half-blind, hearing his voice, paled. Because she had heard that same voice many years ago, the day they forced Estelle to disappear, the day they stole her story, and now the past was returning, with a different face, but with the same claws. The sun rose over Franklin with a tender laziness, as if it also knew that this day would not be just any other. The air smelled of freshly baked bread and wet earth, although it hadn't rained. Estelle slowly climbed the stone steps leading to the entrance of the old Santa Clara Convent, one of those places that, just by looking at the facade, make you keep silent without anyone asking. She was dressed in simple clothes, but well ironed. Carla had accompanied her to the corner and then stayed behind out of respect. Estelle preferred to go in alone. She didn't want anyone to see how her hands trembled or how the memory squeezed her chest with every step she took. The convent door didn't have a bell or an intercom or a camera, only a brass knocker, cold and oxidized by time. She knocked 3 times. She didn't have to wait long. An older sister with her veil slightly crooked and a kind smile opened it. Sister Aurora? Yes, Estelle recognized her immediately, and by the way the nun narrowed her eyes and put her hand to her chest, she knew the nun recognized her too. Estelle? Ramirez? Both looked at each other as if time had stopped right there, right in the frame of that door. I spent many years wondering if you would ever come back, the sister said in a low voice. Estelle nodded, tears held back. Today I'm not here for me. I'm here for what I left behind and for what you kept silent about. The sister moved aside and let her in. The interior of the convent was just as she remembered it, cool, with thick walls and the smell of old incense. The echo of her footsteps felt louder in the hallways. Every corner had a story, every wooden bench, every dusty stained glass window, every creaking door. Sister Aurora led her to a small office behind the chapel. They closed the door. The air became thick. Don't misunderstand me, sister. I know why you did it. You protected me, you hid me, you fed me. You gave me refuge, but you also kept too much silent, Estelle said bluntly. We did what we were ordered, the sister replied. Not everything was in our hands. Who ordered you? It wasn't the church. It was a private donation, a conditional help, a discreet visit, a powerful last name. Estelle didn't need her to say the name. Alfonso, she whispered. Sister Aurora lowered her head. He came here once, very early, with a lawyer. He brought a letter supposedly signed by his brother and asked for access to the room where you were. We didn't let him in, but we did give him a copy of the register. We thought it was a family matter. We didn't know what would come next. Did you keep anything? The nun hesitated. Then she got up and opened a locked drawer. She took out a yellowish envelope, sealed with broken wax. "This was saved with your name on it. We never gave it to you. Sister Letitia said you left so hurriedly that morning when they secretly took you away that no one thought to hand it to you. And then Alfonso came back, and we were forbidden to have contact with you." Estelle took it with trembling hands. "What's in here?" "I don't know. We never opened it." Estelle carefully broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper folded in 4. She recognized Ignatius's handwriting before reading a single word. The ink was faded, but still legible. "Estelle, if you are reading this, then you managed to escape Alfonso's shadow. Don't trust anyone. If something happens to me, look for Mr. Mendizabal. He has the will, the papers, the receipts. I left everything in order for you. Don't let my brother take the only thing that belongs to you by right, you and our son." Estelle put her hand to her chest. "He knew," she murmured. "Long before he died," the sister added. "And I think he also knew that someone would want to silence you." Estelle was silent for a few minutes. Then she looked up. "I need something else, sister. Anything you ask for, daughter. I want to know if anyone else came to ask about me lately, in these past few days." Sister Aurora hesitated. She became nervous. "Yesterday, just before you called, a man came. Grey suit, soft voice. He said he was your lawyer, but he didn't show us any identification. He only asked if you were here in the 1980s. We didn't give him any information, but I saw him look toward the archives. He was very interested. Too interested." Estelle closed her eyes. "They are already looking to destroy what hasn't come to light yet. What do you plan to do?" "Not hide anymore. Not anymore." Hours later, Robert arrived at the convent, as they had agreed. Estelle was waiting for him on the bench in the interior courtyard, under an old lemon tree that provided shade and memory. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Never. But that doesn't matter." Robert looked at her with respect. Not with pity, not with doubt, with respect. "What did you find?" Estelle took the envelope out of her purse. Another letter from Ignatius. And one more clue. The will. It's in Mendizabal's hands. Let's go see him. Today. Robert nodded. "And after that, Mum, what are we going to do about Alfonso?" Estelle looked at him for a long time, as if she still found it difficult to call him that, as if the name sullied her inside. "We are going to do what he fears most. We are going to tell the truth." But as mother and son left the convent with firm steps, from a grey car parked half a block away, a man watched with binoculars. He wore earphones connected to a radio and a camera in the back seat. He made a short call. "They've left. They're heading to the law office." On the other side, a voice responded. "Don't lose them. If they open that will, everything will collapse. Be prepared. It's time to act." Mr. Mendizabal's office was located in an old mansion in the Upper East Side neighborhood, one of those buildings that survive among modern skyscrapers as stubborn witnesses of the past. The facade was covered in vines, and the black iron gate creaked every time someone pushed it. Estelle and Robert arrived shortly before noon. They had left the convent in silence, their minds full of names, dates, and fragments of memories that didn't settle in their minds. Estelle held the envelope with the newly recovered letter in her purse, as if it were a sacred object. Robert walked beside her with his brow furrowed, not in anger, but in a concentration he could barely conceal. The secretary received them discreetly, offered them coffee, and escorted them to a room with solid wood furniture and a huge window overlooking the garden. A few minutes later, Mr. Arthur Mendizabal appeared with his usual sobriety. It's good to see you again, he said, shaking Estelle's hand and then Robert's. Though I fear what we are about to review today will not be easy to digest. It never has been, Estelle replied, sitting down without taking her eyes off the table. Mendizabal settled into the chair across from them, opened a leather folder, and placed a thick paper envelope on the table, sealed with antique wax. Written on it in blue ink were the words, "Private will of Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. Deliver only to Estelle Ramirez Jimenez." Robert swallowed. His mother didn't blink. This document was kept under the express instructions of its author. Ignatius requested that it not be opened until you, Mrs. Estelle, personally requested it. More than 40 years have passed, Mendizabal said solemnly. Are you sure? Estelle nodded without speaking. The lawyer broke the seal with a silver letter opener and slowly unfolded the pages. He began to read aloud. I, Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez, an adult American of sound mind and in total freedom, declare this will to be a reflection of my last wishes. I hereby state that I have maintained a deep, romantic relationship with Mrs. Estelle Ramirez Jimenez, of whom I am convinced she is the only woman who has marked my life with truth and dignity. Product of that relationship, a child was born, Robert Ramirez, whom I recognize as my biological son, although for social, family, and political reasons I could not give him my last name during my lifetime. Therefore, and this being my right as testator, I declare my son, Robert Ramirez, as the universal heir of my assets, properties, bank accounts, and corporate shares, designating Mrs. Estelle Ramirez Jimenez as the sole and legitimate administrator until he reaches legal adulthood or is in a condition to fully assume his rights. The office fell into absolute silence. Not even the hum of the fan broke the tension that had settled like a thick curtain. Robert rested his hands on his knees. He felt a dizziness that didn't come from his body, but from his mind. Estelle's eyes were full of tears, but they hadn't fallen yet. Is all of this legal? Robert asked in a low voice. Completely, Mendizabal replied. The will is notarized, signed before 2 witnesses, and was registered as a private document with legal validity. No one could challenge it, because no one knew of its existence except Alfonso. Robert looked up. Alfonso? Yes. Ignatius suspected his brother might take action against him. That's why he didn't register it publicly. He left instructions for this to only be opened with the presence of his mother. Alfonso never had access to this document. But... Mendizabal paused. But what? But he did have access to everything else. Ignatius, in his naivety, kept many things under joint names. Alfonso betrayed him from the inside. He diverted funds, manipulated records, and when Ignatius died in that supposed accident, he took control of everything. With no recognized heirs, no one could stop him. Until now, Estelle said, finally breaking the silence. The lawyer nodded. And if this reaches the IRS, the press, or the current investors of the De la Torre family, the empire that Alfonso built collapses. Robert stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, a hummingbird fluttered among the garden flowers. I don't want money, he said without turning around. I don't want houses or accounts or power. I just want the truth. You already have that, son, Estelle said, standing up. No, Robert countered, turning to face her. I have a part. Alfonso still needs to pay for what he did. For Ignatius, for you, for Julian, for everyone. The lawyer stood up too. If you decide to proceed, I can register the will and file a lawsuit for misappropriation, falsification of documents, and omission of inheritance. But that means exposing you to the media. This will be everywhere. Robert looked at his mother. Estelle lowered her head. For a moment she hesitated. But then, remembering the way they had kicked her out of her house, the image of her grandchildren unable to come out and defend her, the broken bag with her medications, the insult of being called trash, her face hardened. Go ahead, counselor. Let the whole country hear everything. When they left the office, the air in the street felt different, heavier, as if someone was watching them, and they weren't wrong. A block away, the man in the grey car made one last call. They're going to proceed legally. We have to act before the will is registered. Instructions? He asked. On the other end, Alfonso's voice was clear and dry. Silence the old woman, and make sure it's the last time she opens her mouth. The call had been brief, dry, and precise. Silence her. 3 words were enough for Alfonso de la Torre's entire mechanism to be set in motion. He didn't need to give more details. He knew exactly who he was referring to, how to do it, and above all, what was at stake if Estelle spoke. For years, Alfonso had built his empire on the wreckage of his brother Ignatius's story. He used tragedy, inheritance, contacts, and silence. A silence that was bought, imposed, and forced. And now that entire edifice of power was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, at Carla's house, Estelle was preparing coffee as she always did, with just the right amounts of water and sugar, as if a war was not about to explode around her. But something in her movements betrayed that she was no longer calm. She was sleeping little. She was talking less. Since they left Mendizabal's office with the legal copy of the will, something had stirred inside her. A premonition, an ancient instinct, that feeling on the back of her neck that says someone is watching you. And she wasn't mistaken. That afternoon, while Robert was reviewing documents in the dining room and Patricia was silently preparing dinner, there was a knock on the door. 3 dry knocks. Carla was the first to look out the window. You again? She snapped, frowning. I'm here to speak with Robert, Alfonso replied bluntly. I'm not leaving until I see him. Robert heard his voice from inside and immediately stood up. His mother also got to her feet, her face tense. Don't go out, Estelle warned him. I have to, he replied. He opened the door. Alfonso, impeccably dressed, looked at him with that expression that only men used to giving orders have. Robert didn't move. He observed him as one watches a caged beast that can still bite. 5 minutes, Robert said. 1 is enough for me, Alfonso replied, crossing the threshold uninvited. He entered the dining room as if it were his own house. He sat down without permission. He looked around. He sniffed the air as if searching for the presence of something invisible. You have documents in your hands that don't belong to you, Alfonso said, getting straight to the point. They are my brother's will, an invalid will. It was never registered during his lifetime. It was never public. It was never recognized by any authority. It was signed before a notary public, and hidden for 40 years. Why do you think your mother never presented it? Because even she didn't trust what she was doing. Estelle clenched her fists. She did not answer. What do you want? Robert asked, controlling his anger. An agreement, Alfonso said, taking a thick envelope from his briefcase. He placed it on the table with a soft but firm thump. $10 million, in cash, in exchange for you renouncing any legal action. Not one more word about Ignatius. Not one more word about Estelle. Bury the will. And you keep your family, your job, and your silence. Robert looked at him without blinking. Do you think you can buy my name? Not your name. Your comfort. Your stability. Do you really want to drag your children into a legal battle that is going to leave you emotionally, publicly, and financially ruined? This isn't TV. This is real life. Real life, Robert repeated, "where you stole the inheritance from your own brother, stripped my mother of her dignity, and now you come to buy my conscience." "I'm not interested in your conscience. I'm interested in your silence." Estelle took a step forward. For the first time in years, she stood face to face with Alfonso. She was no longer the young girl from the tailor shop, nor the woman hidden in the convent. She was a mother, a survivor, and the only one who still had something to say. "You never understood Ignatius," she said with a firm voice. "You never knew what it was like to love someone more than yourself. He protected me until the last day, and now you want to silence what is already written, but this time you won't be able to." "And you think the world is going to believe a woman like you?" Alfonso shot back with contempt. "They threw you out into the street like trash. No one defended you, no one listened to you. And now you want to be the hero." "I don't care what the world believes. I care that my son knows the truth. I care that my grandchildren grow up without fear, and that you, for once in your life, face what you did." Alfonso got up furiously, grabbed the envelope violently, and put it back into the briefcase. "Last warning," he said before leaving. "If you go ahead, you're going to regret it. Not just you, but everyone." That night, Estelle didn't sleep. She sat on the bed with the diary in her hands, the same one Patricia had returned after copying the entire thing into a digital file. The rain beat insistently against the window. It was a stormy night, literally and symbolically. Robert walked back and forth across the living room, reviewing documents, making calls, looking for media outlets willing to publish the story. Patricia supported him in everything. David, their son, had already designed a folder with all the digitized content. But what no one knew was that on that same night, while the wind lashed the trees in the Queen's neighborhood, a car without license plates was parking half a block away. 2 men got out. One of them wore a black leather glove on his right hand, the other a syringe with clear liquid, and both knew exactly which door they were going to knock on. That night, the clock struck 2 o'clock in the morning when Estelle woke up with a start. It hadn't been a loud noise. It wasn't a scream or an explosion. It was something more subtle, a vibration in the air, an absence of sound, a sensation known only by those who have lived in hiding for years. She got up silently. Everyone in Carla's house was asleep. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the wall clock filled the darkness. Estelle walked to the kitchen barefoot. She opened the window curtain that faced the street and felt something squeeze her stomach. A dark car, lights off, without license plates, parked right in front of the house. She didn't turn on the light. She didn't move. She just watched. The car seemed empty, but there was something about it, something that didn't belong on that street or at that hour. She returned to her room with a heavy heart. She couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, Mr. Mendizabal appeared at the door with an envelope in his hand and a serious look. His jacket was wrinkled, he had dark circles under his eyes, and an expression they hadn't seen on him before. He didn't ask for coffee. He didn't ask how they were. He went straight to the point. "I received this last night," he said, showing the sealed envelope. "It was left at my office, with no return address. But the paper, the typeface, and the message tell me everything I need to know." Estelle took it. She opened it slowly. A single sheet. No signature, no letterhead. Just a phrase in black ink. "Lawyers die too." "Don't insist." Robert jumped up from the chair. "What does this mean?" "It means Alfonso is desperate," the lawyer replied bluntly. "And when a man like him is cornered, he becomes dangerous. Can we go ahead with the lawsuit?" "We can, but not without consequences. This is no longer just a family dispute. It's a legal, social, and perhaps physical war." Estelle looked at him with steady eyes. We are no longer afraid, neither my son nor I. If I have to put my body on the line for the truth to come out, I will do it. Robert nodded. What he doesn't know is that we are no longer alone. Hours later, the lawyer took them to a notary's office in downtown Nashville. There they officially registered Ignatius's will, the legal copy, Estelle's diary, transcribed and authenticated by experts, and the documents delivered by the Santa Clara convent. They left the notary's office with a thick folder, a fresh notarial seal, and the certainty that there was no turning back. This is what changes everything, the lawyer said as he handed them a copy. From now on, Alfonso can no longer hide. Estelle took a deep breath. And now what? Subpoena the media, go to trial, file the lawsuit for misappropriation of assets, and also for attempted murder, if we get what I expect. Robert looked at him attentively. What do you expect? Mendizabal took an envelope with printed photographs from his briefcase. An former employee of the Della Torre business group gave me this. Old photos, internal documents, bank records that prove illegal movements after Ignatius's death. And something else. He slid a clear image onto the table. An altered death certificate, altered dates, a forged signature. Here is the proof that Alfonso manipulated his own brother's death. Estelle was silent for a long time. Is that enough to put him in jail? Not yet. But if we get witnesses, if someone from the inside talks, we have him. Back home, Carla served them chicken soup. The tension was as thick as the steam from the bowl. Patricia arrived later with David. The boy looked serious, his eyes burning. Dad, Grandma, I saw something weird. Everyone looked at him. A man approached my school. He said he was a journalist. He asked me about you, Grandma. He knew your full name. He asked me if you were the woman in the viral video, the one circulating under the title, The Grandmother Kicked Out on the Street. Estelle tensed. Video? Yes, someone recorded the day they kicked you out. It's being shared on social media. It has thousands of views. And the comments, they're on your side. Robert opened his cell phone. He found it in seconds. The video showed the exact moment she fell with the suitcase, the envelope rolling on the sidewalk, Robert's shout calling her trash, a cruel testimony, but also perfect for showing the world the truth. Estelle closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. Then it has begun. That same night, while everyone was having dinner, someone knocked on the door. Carla went to open it. An envelope. No one there. No car. No footsteps. Just the envelope, taped to the gate. Carla brought it inside. Estelle opened it with steady hands. Again, no return address. But this time the message was different. See you at the hearing. This isn't over. And below that line, a photo. Her, Ignatius, and a baby in his arms. Robert. The past was no longer a secret. Now it was evidence, and there was someone else who was not going to allow that truth to reach the courts. The one who had survived so many years manipulating from the shadows was about to show himself to the world, and he wouldn't come alone. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storm. Estelle felt uneasy, as if her steps were leading her towards something inevitable. She had lived her whole life postponing truths, hiding behind duty, swallowing words to protect those she loved. But now, what she held in her hands could no longer be silenced. That morning, Mr. Mendizabal urgently summoned her to his office. He didn't want to talk on the phone. Something important came up. That's all he said. Robert accompanied her. Carla offered to watch the house. Patricia and David were also out, collecting more documents and finalizing details for the hearing. Estelle knew that what was coming would be a before and after. The office smelled of fresh coffee and old wood. In the center of the room, on the main table, there was an old but well-preserved metal suitcase. It was one of those suitcases that one doesn't buy, but inherits. The surface was marked with hand-engraved initials, IDTV. Estelle stood in front of it for several seconds. "Is that Ignatius's?" she asked in a low voice. "Yes," Mendizabal replied. "It was delivered to me in 1983, a few days before his death. He knew his end was near. He entrusted it to me with the instruction not to open it until you gave the order." Robert took a step forward. He placed a hand on the cold metal. "What's inside?" "Papers, photographs, recordings, receipts, maybe more evidence that Alfonso betrayed him from within, but no one has seen the contents in more than 40 years. If anyone has the right to open it, it's you." Estelle slowly nodded. "Open it." Mendizabal turned the two locks with a golden key. The dry sound of the mechanism releasing the lock made everyone hold their breath. When he lifted the lid, a slight odor of dampness and old paper filled the room. Inside, everything was precisely organized. A blue folder with worn edges, a wooden box with a cassette tape inside, a bundle of black and white photographs tied with red string, and a plain white envelope, unmarked, thicker than the others. Robert took out the folder. Opening it, he found property contracts, bank account documents, land deeds, all in Ignatius's name, all signed, all dated before his death, and all with a handwritten annotation, pending transfer to Estelle Ramirez or Robert Ramirez. "Here is the proof that he wanted to leave everything to us legally," Estelle murmured, her voice breaking. The lawyer took out the wooden box and extracted the cassette. He observed it carefully. "It's a recording. It's dated October 19th, 1983, 4 days before the accident." "Can we listen to it?" Robert asked. "Of course. I have a player," Mendizabal said, connecting an old device on the desk. He pressed the play button. The tape advanced with a background noise, and then a deep, firm voice, known to Estelle more than anyone. "My name is Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. I am recording this message in case something happens to me. I have reasons to believe that my brother Alfonso is behind the strange movements in the company accounts. I have discovered illegal transactions, and I plan to confront him this week. If I don't get to, if something happens to me, deliver this recording to Estelle. She knows what to do." Robert and Estelle looked at each other. The voice continued, now more paused. "Estelle, my love, if you are listening to this, it is because I am no longer here. I took care of you as best I could, but I failed myself by not protecting you better. Our son deserves the truth. Don't let him be raised on a lie. And if you can, give him my last name, even if it's late. What I regret most is not being there when he was born, but even from where I am still his father." The silence that remained after the recording was heavy, almost sacred. Estelle pressed her lips together. Finally, the tears fell, slow, hot, not out of sadness, but out of justice. Finally, the voice that was ripped from her heart returned to sustain her. Mendizabal took the white envelope. He opened it and took out a signed sheet of paper. "It is an authorization for the transfer of assets to Robert's name, but there is something else, an annotation that worries me." "What is it?" "It says, in case of my death, safe deposit box number 74 at the National Bank must be opened. Only Estelle or Councillor Mendizabal are authorized." Robert frowned. "Another box?" "Yes, and according to the numbering, It must be in the maximum security vault. What's in there? Estelle asked, her voice firmer than she expected. We don't know, but if Ignatius kept it locked for so long, it must be something bigger than all of this. At that moment, Patricia called Robert. You have to come back, she said, her voice frantic. Carla is ill, and Estelle needs to see her. What happened? I don't know, she said, trembling as she entered the house. She says someone followed her, that they touched her from behind when she was leaving the market. She fainted. We already called the doctor, but she's saying weird things. She's talking about the black car, the same one from yesterday. Robert hung up. We have to go. Estelle stood up without hesitation. They closed the suitcase. The lawyer promised to safeguard everything until the next appointment, but as they left the office, something already felt different, because what had begun as a family dispute was now turning into something bigger, a conspiracy, a truth too uncomfortable to be revealed, and a family that was about to face the darkest power that had pursued them for a lifetime. The courtroom wasn't large, but that morning it seemed to be holding the breath of half the country. Outside, television cameras, reporters, and photographers crowded behind the barriers. Social media was already boiling since the case of the expelled grandmother had exploded, but now the public had a new name to chew on: Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. The businessman who died under suspicious circumstances, and his illegitimate son, Robert Ramirez, who until weeks ago was just an ordinary citizen. Estelle arrived with a serene face, accompanied by her assistant lawyer and Robert. She was dressed simply, as always, but something was different about her. A firmness in her gaze, a weight in her walk, a dignity that neither time nor humiliation had managed to break. The judge, a mature man with a dry voice, called for silence. We are here to hear arguments regarding the legal validity of the private will of Mr. Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez, as well as the accusations of forgery, omission of inheritance, and identity manipulation. I ask for respect from all present. This court will not be a stage for media spectacle, only facts. Estelle's lawyer was the first to speak. She presented the original will, with notarial seals, Ignatius's cassette recording, and the documents recovered from the convent and Mendizabal's office. Then Patricia took the stand to declare under oath that she had found Estelle's diary and that its content matched all the documents presented. It's not just paper, she said with a firm voice. It's an entire life that she kept silent, out of fear, out of shame, to protect her son, and out of love, the same love that her family denied her for decades. The judge listened to her attentively. Afterward, the opposing counsel, a man sent by Alfonso's interests, tried to disqualify the documents, claiming they had been recently fabricated. But Mendizabal took the floor. This will was registered before a notary public in 1983, and the bank accounts, the financial movements, the contracts with Mr. Ignatius de la Torre's handwritten signature corroborate it. Furthermore, he added, placing a black folder on the desk, here I have the records of million-dollar deposits to Alfonso's personal accounts, made hours after his brother's death. The opposing lawyer tried to protest, but the judge raised his hand. Is there evidence that Mr. Alfonso de la Torre manipulated the death certificate? Yes, Your Honor, Mendizabal said. We have a handwriting expert who certifies that the signature was forged. Estelle did not say a word. She only looked forward, her face serene, her hands folded in her lap. In the second half of the hearing, Robert was called to testify. The judge looked him straight in the eye. Did you know you were Ignatius de la Torre's son? No, Your Honor. I found out a few weeks ago. I grew up believing I was the son of Julian Ramirez, my mother's husband. But now I understand many things. His coldness, his distance, and my mother's silence, who did what she could with what she had. And why are you here today? Because my mother does not deserve to die with that weight on her, because I don't want his inheritance. I'm not looking for riches, only that what she lived through, what she suffered, and what she fought for in silence all her life, be recognized. Robert's words made more than one person in the room wipe away tears without trying to hide it. At that moment, the judge paused. Is Mr. Alfonso de la Torre present? There was a dense silence. The chair reserved for him remained empty. His lawyer stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Alfonso is under medical custody. He has had a recent incident and cannot appear. Can you present a certificate? Of course, he replied, handing over a document. The judge reviewed it. He frowned. He set it aside. Very well. This court will analyze the complete content and will issue its ruling in the coming days. For now, the preliminary validity of the will is admitted, access to the De la Torre Business Group's accounts is frozen, and legal protection is requested for Mrs. Estelle Ramirez Jimenez and her family. Estelle closed her eyes for a moment. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step that no one imagined would be taken at 83 years old. Leaving the courthouse, a cloud of reporters surrounded them. Flashes, microphones, cameras, everyone shouted the same name. Mrs. Estelle, please, what do you have to say to the American public? She didn't stop. She walked slowly, surrounded by her children, her grandson, her lawyer. But before getting into the waiting vehicle, she turned and looked directly at the cameras. I want to tell you something, she said without hesitation. I am not here for revenge. I am here for justice. For all the women who were silenced. For those who raised other people's children without anyone acknowledging it. For those who were kicked out of their homes as if they were worthless. Enough is enough. We are not trash. And she left. That same night, in a luxurious suite at a private hospital, Alfonso de la Torre watched the news on television with his lips pressed together. His face was pale, his gaze empty. Beside him, his personal assistant offered him a pill for his blood pressure. Alfonso didn't take it. There's no turning back now, he said in a hoarse voice. What do we do? What we should have done from the beginning, he whispered. Play the last card. Are you sure? Absolutely. The next day, at dawn, an envelope was slid under the door of Mendizabal's office. It had no return address, no signature, no address, just a phrase written by hand in red ink. If you go ahead, the kid dies. And with it, a photograph. A recent portrait of David, Estelle's grandson, taken secretly outside his high school. The envelope with the threat reached the lawyer Mendizabal's hands first thing in the morning. It wasn't the first warning he had received since the case became public, but this one was different. It had a face. David's face. Estelle knew it before they told her. Her body knew it. Her blood ran cold as soon as she saw the lawyer's expression when he walked through the door, and although he tried to maintain his composure, he couldn't hide what was weighing on his soul. It's not just any threat, Estelle, he said in a grave voice as he spread the photograph on the dining room table. This is no longer just pressure. This is direct. It's personal. Estelle looked at the image with a heavy heart. It was David, her grandson, her boy, captured just as he was leaving high school, with his backpack slung over his shoulder and his headphones on. It was a photo taken from a distance, but clear. A surveillance. If you go ahead, the kid dies, the lawyer repeated, almost with disgust. That's what they wrote, and they signed it in red ink. They are desperate, Estelle, and dangerous. Robert, who had just arrived, clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white. He took the photo, looked at it for a second, and tore it to pieces. "We are not going to stop," he said. "They are not going to silence us." "I know," Mendizabal replied, "but we also can't expose David. Starting today, he cannot be alone. We are going to request judicial protection, precautionary measures. This has already gone beyond family matters." Patricia, who was in the kitchen, heard everything in silence. She entered without saying a word. She approached Estelle and took her arm. "We won't let anything happen to him, to any of them." That same day, the lawyer called an urgent press conference. The threats had to be made public. The best defense was light, truth, visibility. In front of more than a dozen reporters and cameras, Mendizabal read the contents of the envelope. Without filters, without embellishments. He showed the photograph and openly denounced Alfonso de la Torre's circle. "This is not fiction," he declared. "It is the life of a family that has been trampled for decades by corrupt interests and the complicit silence of the authorities. Today we are making it public because we are not afraid. Because if something happens to David Ramirez, Robert Ramirez, or Mrs. Estelle Ramirez, the person responsible will be Alfonso de la Torre and anyone protecting him." The news exploded. That same afternoon, the de la Torre name again filled the headlines. But not for business success or for donations to private foundations. This time it was for death threats, concealment of a will, tax fraud, and document forgery. And the biggest blow was yet to come. The next day, at the Tennessee Forensic Science Institute, the DNA test was performed. Estelle, her heart in her throat, accompanied Robert. It was a simple, quick procedure. A saliva sample and a signature were enough, but the emotional weight of each step weighed on her as if she were walking with bones soaked in memories. "What if I'm not his son?" Robert asked in a low voice while they waited in the hallway. Estelle looked at him with eyes full of calm and a little sadness. "Then you will be the son I raised with all the love I had, with or without a last name. But I knew who you were from the first time I held you in my arms. You know it too." Robert lowered his gaze. He nodded. The result arrived 3 days later and left no room for doubt. 99.97% genetic compatibility between Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez and Robert Ramirez. Father-son relationship confirmed. The report was certified by experts and endorsed by a notary public. The document was delivered directly to the court and attached to the judicial file. That same day, Robert requested the rectification of his birth certificate. He wanted his father's last name to appear on that paper, that for decades had sustained a lie. But what no one expected was what came next. While the press conference was being held to officially present the DNA results, a veteran, seasoned investigative journalist asked to speak. "Mrs. Estelle," he said in a serious voice, "there's something else you should see." He took out a manila envelope. "Years ago, a colleague of mine investigated Ignatius de la Torre's death. He didn't find much, but he saved this copy. And now that you have come forward, I decided to dig again." He opened the envelope and took out a document with the state prosecutor's office seal, dated October 1983. It was the original accident report, but what was crossed out, and what the journalist had recovered, was the most chilling piece of information. The driver's seatbelt was cut with an external tool. No evidence of braking was found. The brake system was manipulated. A mournful silence fell over the room. "Was he murdered?" a reporter asked in a low voice. Mendizabal took the document. "This changes everything." Estelle closed her eyes as if someone had finally lifted the weight off her back. Robert stood up. "They didn't just steal his last name. They murdered him. And as the conference images went viral in a matter of minutes, in a dark office in northern Tennessee, a man received a message on his cell phone. DNA test confirmed. Homicide declaration imminent. They are willing to do anything. Alfonso closed his eyes, took a deep breath. Then slowly he took a small wooden box from his desk. Inside, a sealed letter, written by Ignatius 38 years ago. He still hadn't opened it, but he knew perfectly well what it said. And what Ignatius had left written there was the only key to what was to come. Because when the final truth came to light, it would no longer be a scandal. It would be a conviction and a fall without return. Alfonso de la Torre was not a man who allowed himself to lose. For more than 4 decades, he had controlled companies, manipulated politicians, bought judges, and destroyed lives with a perfectly calculated smile. But that morning, seeing his name linked to a murder on the headlines of every newspaper in the country, he knew that something had slipped out of his hands. From his private office desk, hidden behind a tax consultancy facade in the Providencia neighborhood, Alfonso threw his glass of cognac against the wall. The glass shattered. The shards splattered the linen curtains and the imported carpet. No one dared to enter. "Damn it, Ignatius," he snarled through clenched teeth. "Even dead, you're screwing me over." His eyes were red, his hands trembling. And on the desk, 3 things. 1. The DNA report confirming that Robert was Ignatius's legitimate son. 2. The original will, now legally registered. 3. A leaked copy of the forensic report that revealed the manipulation of Ignatius's car. The entire building seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the boss to decide what to do. Alfonso, without saying a word, pressed a button hidden under the desk. Minutes later, his personal assistant, Fred, entered and closed the door behind him. "I want the judges to start moving," Alfonso ordered, "and if they don't cooperate, make their families tremble." "We can't pressure them that much anymore, boss. This has become national news. The court is shielded by the media, activists, and even the Archbishop has spoken out." "Then by the prosecutor, the secretary, the lady who cleans the bathrooms if necessary. But this cannot reach the final trial. Do you hear me?" Fred nodded, his face pale. "And what do we do with Ignatius's letter?" "Nothing. Not yet." Meanwhile, at Carla's house, Estelle went over the complete file that Mr. Mendizabal had organized again and again. Each page was a piece of her disorganized life that now, finally, had shape. Every signature, every receipt, every photograph. Everything matched. Everything proved what she had kept silent for so long. Robert, for his part, had his fists clenched on the table. "This man murdered my father," he said in a grave voice, "and he didn't even have the courage to do it with his own hands." "Your father died because he trusted," Estelle said without looking up. "And now he wants to kill again, this time through defamation, through fear, through threats." Patricia entered from the patio with her cell phone in her hand. "The news is saying that Alfonso is preparing a counter-lawsuit, that he is going to use his power to make us look like opportunists, that he is going to say that all of this is a setup." Robert laughed with rage. "A setup? Is he also going to say that Ignatius signed the will under duress?" "He's going to say that you and I forged it," Patricia added. "That Estelle made up the diary, that the cassette was edited, that everything was orchestrated to steal his fortune." Estelle sighed. "If he has to drag us through the mud to avoid facing himself, he will." "And what are we going to do?" Patricia asked. "The same thing we've done until now," Robert replied. "Endure, expose, resist." Days later, the lawyer Mendizabal received an official notification. Alfonso had requested the closure of the case for medical and psychological reasons, claiming he was not in a condition to face a legal process. The judge, in an unusual move, granted him a 30-day extension. Public outrage was immediate. On social media, the hashtags #Justice for Estelle and #Ignatius didn't die alone went viral. Television programs began interviewing people from Alfonso's past: ex-partners, ex-employees, ex-secretaries. Some began to talk. One of them, an accountant named Omar Duran, secretly contacted Mendizabal's office. "I know what happened to Ignatius," he said over the phone, "and I also know what Alfonso did afterward. I have copies of transfers, I have access to altered contracts, and I'm afraid." "We can protect you," the lawyer assured him. "And if something happens to me, then what you have will be made public. You are not alone." Omar agreed to testify. The bomb that Alfonso feared now had a fuse. In parallel, an anonymous journalist leaked a series of voice recordings to the country's highest-rated news program, where Alfonso insulted Estelle. He admitted that Robert, the bastard, would never have his last name, and mocked Ignatius's accident, insinuating that some brakes loosen on their own if they are given the right push. Estelle listened to the recording in silence. Robert, standing next to her, could not contain his rage. "I want to see him in jail, Mum," he said with moist eyes. "Not for the money, but for you, for what he did to you, for what he took from you, for every night you spent crying in silence." Estelle took his hand firmly. "He will fall. Don't doubt it." That night, Alfonso was summoned to testify again before the state prosecutor's office. He did not show up. He sent his lawyer with a new medical excuse, but something was different. The judge in charge of the new file, a young woman with a firm voice, ordered the opening of a formal investigation for obstruction of justice and concealment of evidence, and also signed an unprecedented order to issue house arrest for citizen Alfonso de la Torre with permanent custody by the National Guard, while the trial for document forgery, illicit enrichment, and alleged intentional homicide proceeds. A few hours later, an armoured patrol car arrived at Alfonso's mansion. They took him out escorted, without cameras, without photos, without statements, but someone saw it. Mrs. Martha, Estelle's neighbour, was watching television with her granddaughter when suddenly, on a late-night news programme, a blurry image of the convoy transporting Alfonso to his house, Arrest, appeared. Martha got up from the couch and walked straight to Carla's house. When Estelle opened the door, Mrs. Martha's eyes were teary. "I thought you were crazy, Estelle," she said between sobs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not believing you before. I'm sorry for keeping quiet. I'm sorry for not coming out that morning." Estelle hugged her. "It doesn't matter, Martha. You're here now." But while justice was finally beginning to move, Alfonso, in the silence of his mansion surrounded by soldiers, opened the letter Ignatius had left for him almost 40 years ago. He read it slowly, and when he finished it, he knew there was one more name, one that no one knew, one that Ignatius protected until the end. And that name, if it came out, would destroy not only his legacy, but that of the entire De la Torre family. And now, the only person who knew it was Estelle. The sun that morning seemed different, not because it was brighter. In fact, it was cloudy, but because the whole street had a different energy, as if the air carried something that had never been there before. Respect. Mrs. Estelle, as everyone had known her since she returned to the neighbourhood, walked slowly along the sidewalk. She was not dressed in fancy clothes, nor was she wearing dark glasses like celebrities. Just her light blue shawl, her cloth bag in which she always carried her diary and her medications, and a serene face that no longer asked permission to exist. That morning she was heading to the bakery to buy rolls, and for the first time she didn't have to dodge glances. The windows no longer closed when she passed by. The blinds no longer came down. On the contrary, Mrs. Bertha, a neighbour who for years only greeted her with a nod, or not even that, came out of one of the houses. "Mrs. Estelle," she said with a broken voice, "I want to apologize." Estelle stopped. "Apologize for what, Bertha?" "For believing what they said, for not saying anything that day, for hiding when your son yelled at you in front of everyone. I was afraid, and the shame hasn't left me since." Estelle didn't say anything for a few seconds, then smiled gently. "Silences also scream, Bertha. But the important thing is that today you are no longer silent." She continued on her way, but she hadn't gone 10 steps when another neighbour caught up with her, Mrs. Yolanda, who used to hand out cakes at Christmas to everyone but her. "I brought this for you," she said, handing her a container of rice pudding. "I've seen what they've said on television. I saw the video. It broke my heart. You didn't deserve that." Estelle received it with a smile. "Thank you. Rice pudding always heals old wounds." And she kept walking. When she arrived at the bakery, Mr. Julian, the lifelong baker, came out from behind the counter to serve her personally. In a low voice, without making a scene, he offered her a discount that he previously only gave to special customers. "All this that is happening is justice, isn't it, Mrs. Estelle?" "I don't know, Julian," she replied, "but at least it's a start." Returning home, she came across something that left her speechless. Mrs. Martha, the neighbour across the street, had hung a white canvas with handwritten black letters in her window. "A woman who refused to be trampled lives here." Some neighbours watched from the opposite sidewalk. They didn't say anything, but one by one they began to take out posters, signs, messages. "We are with you, Mrs. Estelle." "A mother is not thrown into the street." "Courage is not inherited, it is demonstrated." And then the unthinkable happened. Estelle's children, the same ones who had expelled her, who had humiliated her in front of everyone, who denied her voice and her truth, came out of the house. Robert was the first to cross the door. His gaze was downcast, his face pale. He didn't speak. Beside him was Patricia, holding the arm of David, who couldn't hide his tears. Robert stopped in front of his mother. "Can we walk with you?" Estelle didn't answer right away. She looked at him with those eyes that had already forgiven him many times, even without him knowing it. And with a slight nod of her head, she took a step forward. He followed her. And at that moment, the whole block fell silent. And then, applause. They were not shouts of support, nor festive signs. They were sincere, slow, deep applause, like those given at the end of a play that leaves no words, only a lump in your throat. Estelle did not cry. She just walked. With her son on one side, her grandson behind her, and the entire neighborhood recognizing what they had ignored for so many years. That same night, the journalist who had leaked Ignatius's accident report contacted Mendizabal again. "There's something else," he said. "Something that was never handed over to the authorities. A series of recorded calls between Ignatius and a woman who was neither Estelle nor his wife." "What woman?" the lawyer asked. "One who is named in the letter that Alfonso found, the one Ignatius left him before he died." "Who is she?" "That's what we're going to find out now." And while Estelle finished washing the dishes at Carla's house, unaware of what was moving in the shadows, a figure stood in front of the gate of the house, wrapped in a long coat and a hat. She observed the facade. Then she took an envelope from her purse, put it through the bars, and left without being seen. Inside the envelope was a photograph. Old, Ignatius, as a young man, he wasn't with Estelle. He was with a girl about 7 years old, with features very similar to Robert's. And on the back, written in firm handwriting, "She is also blood." That night the story changed again, because if there was another daughter, then Estelle was not the only one carrying the secret, and someone else was about to appear. That morning Estelle hadn't slept, not out of fear, not out of sadness, but out of that strange anxiety one feels when a truth is about to come out to the world, not in a low voice or in whispers, but through the mouth of someone who has the power to make half the country listen. At 8:30, a grey car with a television logo parked in front of Carla's house. A cameraman with thick glasses got out, and behind him, a man in a light suit, hair slicked back, a confident voice, and a folder of documents under his arm. It was Alvaro Revueltas, an investigative journalist with more than 30 years of experience. Many knew him as the one who brought out what no one wanted known. That day, he had come for Estelle. "Thank you for opening the doors of your house to us," he said, as he respectfully shook her hand. "Thank you for wanting to tell the story," Estelle replied. "Although it is not just mine, it is many women's." The team set up lights, microphones, and cameras in the dining room. Robert and Patricia helped move the furniture. David, from the living room, watched in silence. Carla just prepared coffee, as if everything were normal. But it wasn't. "We are going to begin," Alvaro said. "And I don't want you to see me as a journalist, Mrs. Estelle. I want you to see me as a grandson who needs to understand what happened to his grandmother, and no one ever explained it to him." Estelle nodded. The camera turned on, and she began to speak. She told everything, from the day she met Ignatius at the tailor shop until the last time she saw him alive. The pregnancy, the convent, the diary, the envelope, the forced silence, the fear of being called crazy, a liar, opportunistic. "I hid everything because I thought that if I said it, they would take my son away from me. I thought they would accuse me. I thought no one would believe me. And for a while I was right. No one believed me. What changed? I no longer care if they don't believe me. I care that the truth lives longer than fear." The journalist listened without interrupting, taking notes, marking phrases. At one point he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Why do you think your son Robert was the cruelest to you?" "Because he was the one who resembled Ignatius the most." "And is that good or bad?" "Both, because he was also the one who could break me or protect me the most." Then it was Robert's turn. He told his version, the discovery, the confusion, the pain, the hatred, the guilt, the love, all in that order, all with eyes full of a repentance that sought not pity, but emotional justice. "I don't want my mother to be a symbol. I want her to be a person. I want her to be heard as a human being, not as a social media martyr." In the middle of the interview, Alvaro took out a photograph that was not among his documents. It was the same one that had been left on the gate the night before. Ignatius, with a 7-year-old girl, similar to Robert, but with different features. On the back, the phrase was still there. "She is also blood." Alvaro placed the image on the table. "Mrs. Estelle, do you know who this girl is?" Estelle carefully took the photograph. She looked at it for several seconds. She frowned. The air in the room became thick. "No," she finally said. "I've never seen her. But that look is exactly like Ignatius's when he was angry." "Do you think Ignatius had another daughter?" "I don't know. He never told me anything. But he didn't tell everyone everything either." The interview ended near noon. Alvaro promised to air it in full, without cuts, on the 9 o'clock primetime news. This story is no longer just yours, Mrs. Estelle. It belongs to the whole country. And know this, people are not on Alfonso's side. They are on yours. Hours later, as the team was leaving, the journalist stopped on the sidewalk. He called from his cell phone. I got everything. Diary, recording, DNA, and something else. There's a girl who could change the course of the trial. Are you going to air it? At 9. And if they silence me, I've already given a copy to 3 colleagues. No one is going to stop this. He hung up. That night, the entire United States tuned into Channel 7. Millions of people saw Estelle's face in close-up, telling everything with that serenity that only years and well-healed scars provide. They saw Robert break down in front of the cameras, admitting his mistakes. They saw the documents, the photographs, the audios, and at the end of the report, an image froze the broadcast. The photograph of the girl, and a question. Who is Ignatius de la Torre's other daughter? 3 states away, in a simple house in Arizona, a woman a little over 40 years old dropped the knife with which she was cutting onions. She approached the television with her mouth open. She put her hands to her face. It can't be. Her 15-year-old daughter approached. What's wrong, Mum? That man, the one in the photo, she whispered. He's your grandfather. And right there, destiny opened a new door again. Because what seemed closed was just beginning. The federal justice courthouse was packed. Despite the defense's attempts to prevent press access and keep the hearings private, the judge had authorized the presence of some accredited media due to the high public relevance of the case. What was initially a dispute over a family inheritance had been transformed into a national scandal with legal, business, social, and human ramifications. It was the day of the formal trial against Alfonso de la Torre, and Estelle would be seated in the front row. There were discreet cameras, an atmosphere of tension charged with expectation, and a silence barely sustained by the murmuring of journalists taking notes, lawyers reviewing papers, and security guards standing firm as statues on each side of the bench. At 11 o'clock sharp, Alfonso entered escorted, handcuffed, his face noticeably aged, but with that look he never lost, the look of someone who still believes himself invincible. He wore a grey suit, without a tie. It was noticeable that he had lost weight, but not arrogance. Estelle looked at him without blinking, not with hatred, but with a serene dignity that unnerved him. Robert, sitting beside her, could barely contain the impulse to stand up when he saw him. Patricia placed a hand on his knee, as if reminding him that they were no longer in the street. Now justice was playing on their side. The judge began the hearing firmly. In this court, citizen Alfonso de la Torre y Vázquez is being tried for the crimes of conspiracy, illicit enrichment, forgery of official documents, and alleged aggravated homicide. This court will hear both sides and will determine, based on evidence and testimony, the truth of the facts. The room fell silent. The prosecution began with the background: Ignatius's death, the suspicious financial movements, the omission of the will, the threats to witnesses, and the recent threat to David's integrity. Then they called the accountant, Omar Duran, to testify. The man, with a trembling but clear voice, confirmed that Alfonso had ordered the manipulation of Ignatius's accounts during his lifetime, diverting funds to tax havens and forging contracts to justify million-dollar movements that were never declared. I saw the transfers, the signatures, the dates, and when Ignatius began to ask questions, there were secret meetings, security changes, silent dismissals. We knew something was going to happen. We just never imagined it would be so definitive. The tension grew when Ignatius's recording was played in the room. His voice resonated through the speakers. If something happens to me, don't let Alfonso touch what I left for Estelle. Don't let him touch her. Because if I die, it won't be an accident. The judge called for silence. Reporters were already writing the headlines for the evening. The eyes of the country were there. Then, it was Estelle's turn. The prosecution asked her how she lived her relationship with Ignatius, how she hid the pregnancy, why she had kept silent for so many years. Estelle, without breaking down, narrated in detail everything she had written in her diary. Every word was a sharp scalpel cutting through decades of impunity. "I'm not here to collect a debt," she said at the end. "I'm here for the country to see what happens when a poor woman crosses paths with power, when the truth is inconvenient, when silence is the only way to survive." The judge called a recess. The room relaxed, but not for long, because what was coming was the most unexpected testimony of all. Upon resuming the hearing, the prosecution asked permission to present a new witness. The judge hesitated. "Who?" "A woman," the prosecutor replied. "Half-sister of Mr. Robert Ramirez's father, biological daughter of Ignatius de la Torre. Her identity has been confirmed by a DNA test." The entire room turned around. Alfonso opened his eyes as if ice had been thrown on his face. A woman a little over 40 years old, with her hair tied back, a firm face, and trembling hands, stood up from the back of the room. Estelle couldn't breathe for a second. "Who?" she whispered, but the answer came on its own. The woman walked to the stand. "My name is Ana Lucia Martinez. I was raised in Arizona. My mother told me never to talk about the man who got her pregnant, but she kept a photo, the same one you showed on television. I am also Ignatius de la Torre's daughter." The prosecutor showed the DNA result. The judge reviewed it, confirmed the record. He nodded. Ana Lucia looked at Alfonso. "You knew about me. For years. My mother asked you for help when I was 10 years old. You ignored her. Then you sent her money, and then you threatened her to make her disappear. They exiled us out of fear. But now I'm here, and I won't be silenced." Alfonso could not hide his confusion. For the first time, his gaze faltered. The judge interrupted the hearing. He said that the preliminary sentence would be given in 24 hours, but it was already clear what was coming. Estelle and Ana Lucia crossed paths on the way out. They did not hug. They did not cry. They only looked at each other, as if they knew that something very big united them long before they met. Robert watched them from the side, and there was no longer anger on his face. There was gratitude, and a question that would accompany him until the end. How many more truths can fit into one single broken family? That night, Alfonso, back in his guarded mansion, locked himself in his office. He opened a secret safe deposit box. He took out an old recorder, and he turned it on. A final tape, recorded by Ignatius the night before he died. He listened to the entire thing, and when it was over, he broke the glass in his hand. Because what Ignatius said on that tape didn't just implicate him, it implicated someone else. Someone who had not yet been mentioned, but who was sitting very close in the court itself. The neighborhood applause, the press backing, the signs on the gate, the affection in the eyes of the neighbors. None of that managed to erase what Robert felt every morning when he woke up and saw his mother's face. Because it doesn't matter how many times an apology is repeated. It doesn't matter if people applaud you for changing, if you now defend what you once destroyed. The past doesn't forget so easily. And he couldn't forgive himself. The trial against Alfonso continued fiercely. The inclusion of Ana Lucia as Ignatius's recognized daughter had shaken the case. The De la Torre name had been dragged through the news, and finally, justice seemed to be taking the place that had been denied to Estelle for decades. But at home, the cracks were internal. Robert was no longer sleeping well. He was eating little. He spent hours in silence, reading old documents, listening to Ignatius's recordings, trying to make sense of everything he had ignored. One morning, while Estelle was folding clothes in the living room, she saw him standing in front of the window. "Are you going to continue like this?" she asked without turning around. "Like this how?" "Like none of this concerns you." Robert didn't answer. Estelle left the clothes on the table and approached. "Son, you didn't kill Ignatius, nor were you the one who forced me to hide the truth. But what you did do was judge me without knowing my story. And that, Robert, that was like killing me in life." He lowered his head. He closed his eyes. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't remember it." "Then don't repeat it. That's all that matters." Things at home began to change. Patricia, who had held the family together during the storm, began to distance herself, not out of lack of love, but out of exhaustion. She had defended him. She had helped expose the truth. But Robert remained locked in his guilt, unable to hug her, unable to see everything he still had. "I don't want to lose you," he told her one night. "You already lost me," she replied, "not because of what you did before, but because of what you are not capable of building now." That night, Patricia took David and their things and went to her sister's house. The following days were grey. Robert was suspended from his job. The media scandal, although it showed him as a victim, had also put him under everyone's scrutiny. His boss asked him for discretion. Some neighbours greeted him coldly, others just patted him with pity, and he crumbled. One afternoon, Estelle found him sitting on the sidewalk outside the house. His eyes were red, his face blank, his hands clasped between his legs, like a child waiting for a scolding. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing you did the day they kicked you out, only you didn't deserve it. And I do." Estelle sat down beside him. "Son," she told him slowly, "I gave birth to you with fear. I raised you with shame, and I loved you with guilt. Not because I didn't love you, but because life taught me that if I told the truth, I would lose everything, and the only thing I didn't want to lose was you." "And you lost me anyway," he replied, "because when I grew up, I was everything Ignatius hated: cold, cowardly, ambitious." "And yet you are here," she said with a hand on his arm. "That's not nothing." That night, Estelle took out the old metal suitcase, put it on the table, opened each compartment, and showed him, one by one, the objects that had been hidden for years: Ignatius's handwritten letter, the deposit receipt in Robert's name, the pregnancy photographs, the first ultrasound, and a sealed letter with Robert's name on the front. "I never gave it to you because I was afraid it would break you more," Estelle said. "But maybe it's what can finish rebuilding you." Robert opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a small portrait, Ignatius holding him in his arms, wrapped in a woven blanket. The letter said, "If you are reading this, son, it is because your mother conquered fear, and you conquered resentment. You didn't know me, but I dreamed of you. Every night and every decision I made was for you: the power, the assets, the silence. Everything cost me less than losing you. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. Don't be like me. Be better." Robert broke down. He cried with a silent, deep sob, like a child who has finally explained why everything hurt so much. Estelle hugged him, not as a mother, but as a woman who for the first time in her life felt free. The next day, Robert voluntarily appeared in court. He asked to testify as a victim and witness, but also as a civil party responsible. He confessed that he had tried to deny the will, that he hid documents out of fear, out of rage, out of selfishness, that he was not innocent, but that he wanted to make amends. The surprised judge called a recess to analyze the declaration. That night, the news called him the son who broke down, but chose to repair. And for the first time in weeks, Robert slept with the window open, without fear. But in the same early morning, in a hidden office in Tepatitlan, an envelope was opened by a man with a thin face and thick glasses. He was an agent from the anti-corruption prosecutor's office, and what he was reading was a letter signed by Ignatius months before he died. It didn't just talk about Alfonso. It named a local politician, a federal judge, and a man in Mendizabal's inner circle, someone who had been present at every step, someone who had remained in the shadows, and who now, thanks to that letter, was about to be unmasked. The morning of September 25th dawned clearer than normal. The sky, free of clouds, seemed to want to offer a respite after weeks of tension. Estelle's hands trembled a little as she held her coffee cup, but not out of fear. It was another kind of tremor, the kind you feel when you are about to make a decision that will change the course of many lives, not just your own. Robert, sitting across from her, silently read the newly printed sheets that Mr. Mendizabal had just handed him. They were the official documents that ratified his legal right as the sole heir to Ignatius's estate, as well as the power of attorney that Estelle had just signed in his name. "Here is everything," the lawyer said. "The properties, the accounts, the stocks, and the authorizations for donation if you decide to cede part of the capital." Estelle nodded without speaking, closed her eyes for a moment, as if chewing on the weight of that word. Donation. "I don't want to keep anything," she finally said. "I just want to close this chapter as I should have years ago, with dignity." "Are you sure?" Robert asked. "Mum, it's a lot of money. It's buildings, land, companies." "Precisely because of that," she replied. "Because they didn't give it to me to live, but to silence me. But I have nothing left to silence." A couple of hours later, in a room at the law office, Estelle gathered everyone involved: Robert, Patricia, David, Anna Lucia, who was now legally recognized as Ignatius's daughter, and Mendizabal himself. Also present was the judge in charge of the inheritance process, convened to authenticate what was about to happen. Estelle stood up. "I am not going to fight for properties. I am not going to spend my old age arguing over square footage or seeking revenge. What I wanted, I already got. For them to listen to me, for them to know the truth, for my son to know who he was, for my name to no longer be dragged through the mud as if it were a shame." She took a breath. "Today I want to formally cede 60% of the inherited estate to a fund for elderly women in situations of abandonment. We are going to found a center in Nashville. It will be called Holy Hope House. It will not be a nursing home. It will be a home." The silence in the room was absolute. Robert's eyes were moist. Anna Lucia just smiled. "The other 20%, she continued, "will be donated to an orphanage in Arizona, where children who have no mother, no father, and no last name are raised." And then she turned to her son. "The rest I leave to you, Robert, but not by blood, but because of what you did when you no longer had to, when you could have left and you stayed." "Mum," he stammered, "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Live differently, that's all I ask." The judge signed the documents through tears. Mendizabal filed each sheet with special care, as if he knew he was witnessing something not seen every day. But just as everything seemed to be taking its final course, Patricia rushed into the room, cell phone in hand. "They just arrested an official from the law office," she said. "A guy named Eugene Ortega, Alfonso's tax advisor." "What did he do?" Mendizabal asked, frowning. "They linked him to fake foreign accounts, and they found something else. A recorded call where he mentions someone in your circle. Someone close. He doesn't give a name, But he says, the one who signs as Estelle's protector. Everyone froze. Are you saying there's someone among us who was working for Alfonso? It seems so. Robert immediately looked at the lawyer, then at the judge, then at his mother. No one moved. No one breathed. Mendizabal took his briefcase. He checked something in his folder. I never signed with that title, he said in a low voice. Estelle's protector. That term is not legal. It's personal. The judge frowned. Then did someone sign using that title in some informal instance? Perhaps as an intermediary, someone who does not appear in the official documents, but who participated from the beginning. Anna Lucia stood up. What if it was one of the people at the convent? Or some official who knew Ignatius in his inner circle? Or someone closer, Robert said coldly. Closer than we imagine. Estelle suddenly remembered something. Carla. Everyone looked at her. Carla was with me when the first envelope appeared, when the lawyer came, when the first papers arrived. She knew everything before, long before. Are you insinuating that Carla... I don't know, but she wasn't just a neighbor. Ignatius knew her. Mendizabal paled. It's true. There is a letter from Ignatius, addressed to someone with the initials CM. I found it weeks ago, but I didn't know who it belonged to. That night, Estelle returned home with an agitated heart. She didn't say anything. She just went up to her room and looked for the diary. Between the last pages, just before the cassette, she found a loose sheet of paper. Old, folded. Opening it, a name hit her like a brick in the chest. Carla Mead. Safe contact. I trust her. If something happens to me, Estelle should be under her care. Estelle dropped the sheet, and for the first time she doubted the only person she had never doubted. The woman who welcomed her when she had nowhere to go. The one who defended her from threats. The one who was by her side every moment. And who now could have been the missing link between Ignatius and Alfonso. The day they placed the sign on the facade, Estelle stood in front of it for several minutes. It was not large, nor ostentatious, just a light wood sign, with hand-engraved letters hanging over the main door. Holy Hope Home, shelter for elderly women in situations of abandonment. The words vibrated in her chest, as if each one had been carved inside her over the years. Because it was not just a sign. It was a mirror, a testament, a promise she had made to herself the night her son kicked her out with a suitcase in her hand, and her dignity torn apart in front of the neighbors. Now that same space, the house where she once lived, where she was once silenced, humiliated, ignored, was becoming a sanctuary for many others who had gone through the same thing. The remodeling took longer than expected, but every detail was chosen with intention. The rooms did not have hospital beds, but home beds. There were cream-colored curtains, soft blankets, woven palm mats, and plants in every window. The dining room was not just functional, it was warm, with a long table where everyone could sit without hierarchy. On one of the walls, they hung a framed photograph of Estelle young, next to Ignatius, in black and white, smiling. No one knew how that photo got there. Maybe it was Anna Lucia, maybe it was Carla, or maybe life decided to return it to her in silence. The first day, 3 women arrived. Mrs. Ophelia, 77 years old, expelled by her daughter-in-law after suffering a stroke. Rosalie, a woman who sold gum at the Minerva traffic circle and slept on a mattress under the bridge. And Lupita, who had been abandoned by her own children at a government nursing home and escaped after hearing about the project on a radio news segment. Estelle welcomed them with open arms, as if she had been waiting for them forever. There are no strict rules here, she said in a firm but sweet voice. Only one. You will never call yourselves a nuisance again, because this house is yours, and you are not a burden. You are living history. The second day, a truck arrived with donations: clothes, groceries, medications, books. A local priest gave a simple blessing, without pomp. A retired teacher volunteered to teach reading and writing to those who never learned. A therapist signed up as a volunteer. Little by little, the house was filled not only with women, but with purpose. The afternoons were filled with conversations, embroidery, folk music from a small speaker that Estelle placed in the living room. The nights with anecdotes that hurt but healed by being shared. Some cried, others laughed, some only listened, but with time they also spoke. One morning, while sweeping the entrance, Estelle found a basket with fresh flowers, a letter without a return address, and a small ceramic figure shaped like a butterfly on the door. She opened the letter. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being the mother many never had. Thank you for not being silent. Holy hope is not a shelter. It is justice made of bricks. Another daughter of life. Estelle smiled with teary eyes. The third Sunday after the opening, Anna Lucia arrived. She brought with her a very thin, elderly woman who could barely walk. She is my mother, she said, the one who raised a daughter in silence, the one who was also silenced by men who thought they owned the world. Estelle approached, took the woman's hands, and with a voice that was barely trembling said, "Welcome. This is your home too." But not everything was light. While the shelter was filled with new stories, the most important battle was being fought in the courts. The prosecutor's office already had enough elements to sentence Alfonso. But the defense lawyers were pulling strings to prolong the trial, seek technicalities, and leak false rumors in the media. One of those leaks reached national television. Estelle Ramirez, the alleged victim, had allegedly received million-dollar deposits years before the trial. It was false. But the damage was done. The journalist who interviewed Estelle, Alvaro Revueltas, came to her defense with a second special broadcast. He showed the bank statements, the will, the legal chronology. Estelle was paid, he said. Yes, but with contempt, with insults, with loneliness. And now they are accusing her of gaining what was taken from her since she was singled out for loving someone she shouldn't have. Popular support returned with more force. Feminist groups, civil associations, law students, housewives, young people and seniors began to gather outside the shelter. Candles, posters, flowers, serenades. Estelle, without wanting it, became a symbol. And although her desire was never fame, she understood that something was changing, not only in her life, but in the entire country. One night, while closing the shelter gate, Carla approached. "Can I talk to you?" Estelle looked at her. She had avoided doing so since she found the letter with the initials CM. "Yes," she replied. Carla's eyes were glassy. "I lied to you. Not all the time. But I did." "Why?" "Ignatius asked me to protect you. And I did. But I also spoke with Alfonso. Once. It was before the accident. I didn't know what he was planning. But I accepted money. He said it was for you. That it was for your safety. But then I knew that wasn't true." Estelle listened without interrupting. "Did you betray me?" "No. But I also didn't prevent them from watching you. I closed my eyes because I was afraid something would happen to you. I was a coward. And that's why I'm here, helping. Not to redeem myself, but because I still love you like a sister." Estelle sighed deeply. "You gave me a roof when no one else did. Now I'm giving you something better. The opportunity not to keep silent again." Carla hugged her. Finally. After so long. But while that hug sealed a wound in a maximum security prison, Alfonso received the news that left him breathless. Ignatius's will had just been published in the official gazette, and with it, a list of names of people involved in his cover-up, among them, a still active magistrate, a high-level official in the prosecutor's office, and a last name he didn't expect to see. Della Torre. It wasn't Ignatius. It wasn't Alfonso. It was someone else. Someone who had betrayed him from within, and who was now willing to destroy everything. Nashville's main square had not experienced anything like it in years. It was not a protest, nor a fair, nor a political event. It was something more intimate, rawer, more real. It was an act of remembrance, of justice, of reparation. And although no one said it out loud, it was also an act of love. The stage had been set up in front of the government palace esplanade. Around it gathered journalists, activists, students, retirees, housewives, young people with signs that read, "She is not alone," and "Silence also kills." But the protagonist of that afternoon was not a public figure. She was not a senator, nor a famous artist. She was a grandmother, a woman who had been stripped of everything, and who now walked through the square with a firm step, supported by the arm of her grandson David, while the entire country looked at her as if they had just realized she had always been there. Estelle wore a simple navy blue dress, with her lifelong shawl over her shoulders. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no elaborate hairdos. Only her face, weathered by years and silences. But that afternoon there was no shadow in her gaze. She climbed onto the stage amidst applause that sought not spectacle, but redemption. Beside her climbed Robert, Patricia, Anna Lucia, the lawyer Mendizabal, and Carla, who accompanied her with teary eyes. The moderator took the microphone. "Today we are not honoring a celebrity. Today we are not applauding a martyr. Today we are recognizing a woman who, owing nothing to anyone, taught us what dignity is. Estelle Ramirez Jimenez, this event is for you." The public stood up from their chairs. The ovation was long, sincere, without choreography. Estelle took the microphone with steady hands. "I am not here to tell you a sad story," she began, "because what happened to me happens every day to thousands of women. Mothers, grandmothers, workers, widows, divorcees, single women. Women who love and are not loved. Women who raise children who later forget them. Women who endure what they shouldn't. I was one of them." She paused. "They kicked me out onto the street like trash. They yelled at me in front of everyone. They ripped away my dignity with words. And the worst thing is that for a long time I thought I deserved it. I thought that silence was my destiny, that I was born to be quiet, to serve, to obey. But one day, I decided not to be silent anymore." Her voice did not tremble. Only the air, only the eyes of those who listened to her. "Today I am not here to seek revenge. I am here to raise my voice for all those who did not make it to this moment, for those who died in silence, for those who live in hiding, for those who still believe that their story is not worth telling. It is worth telling, and as long as I breathe, I will tell it." The applause rose again, this time with handkerchiefs in the air, with open tears. After the speech, Robert took the microphone. It was not on the program. No one expected it. "I am one of those children who failed," he said with a broken voice. "I failed my mother. I failed her when she thought she could trust me, when she looked at me with the same eyes with which she looked at me when I was born, and I responded with contempt." The public fell silent. "But I am here, not to clean up my image. I am here to apologize, publicly, completely, and to promise that I will honor her every day of my life." He stepped down from the stage and knelt before Estelle. She looked at him in silence, carefully helped him up, and hugged him, without words. The ceremony ended with string music. Students from Vanderbilt University performed Endless Love in front of the stage. The women from the Holy Hope shelter were in the front row. Some cried, others prayed in silence. One of them, Lupita, shouted from her chair, "You saved our lives, Mrs. Estelle," and everyone applauded. But in the crowd, a man watched from afar. He was dressed in black, dark glasses, a low hat. No one noticed his presence. In his hands he held an envelope. He walked toward the stage after the ceremony ended, and as Estelle descended the stairs, he handed it to her without saying a word. She took it, and when she opened it, she found something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a letter, signed by Ignatius de la Torre y Vasquez. It was not a copy. It was not a will. It was something else. A letter she had never seen, dated the day before his death, with smeared ink and a final message. Estelle folded it without reading it there. Her eyes trembled. "Who gave it to you?" she asked. The man was gone. And now, that letter hid the final truth, the most feared, the most painful, and the one that Ignatius had left out of all trial. A revelation that would change everything. That night, Estelle didn't sleep. The letter was still on the table, intact, closed. She had carried it in her hand all the way back from the event, wrapped in the same shawl with which she had been expelled years ago, the same one with which, without knowing it, Ignatius had seen her for the last time. It was as if destiny was closing circles that no one else understood, but she did. The house was silent. Carla was sleeping in the guest room, Anna Lucia in the back room, and Robert had gone out to drop off David. It was just her and the letter. She took it in her hands. There was no seal, only a careful fold, done calmly. On the back, in Ignatius's unmistakable calligraphy, it read, "Only for Estelle, when everything has been said." And everything had been said. She opened it. Inside were two things, a handwritten sheet of paper and a small document, folded as if it had been waiting for decades to see the light. She started with the letter. "Estelle, if you are reading this, then you achieved what I could not, surviving the truth, surviving the silence, surviving power. I failed you, and I failed our son. I was a coward when I should have shouted. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed, and I let my brother pull strings that I couldn't cut later. But not everything was cowardice. There were things I hid, not out of fear, but to protect you and her, Estelle. There was another daughter." Estelle felt her heart stop for a second. Anna Lucia was not a mistake. She was the result of abuse. Alfonso used her to blackmail me when he found out about you. He forced me to be silent, to sign an asset transfer in his name, so as not to reveal that I had had a daughter with a vulnerable woman. They took her away, and they forced me to lie to you. I always knew it would come out someday. But I couldn't. I didn't know how. I leave you that document that you will find next to this letter. It is proof of the property transfer I made in Anna Lucia's name. No one has claimed it, because no one knew she existed. Give it to her yourself, not as an inheritance, but as justice, because all the women I have loved in my life have been silenced, and you were the only one who refused to die in a low voice." Estelle carefully folded the letter. The document was real, a property assignment signed by Ignatius in Ana Lucia Martinez's name, dated 2 months before his death. Never registered, never delivered, just waiting for her. That morning, as the sun rose, Estelle sat with Ana Lucia in the shelter's backyard. There was no introduction, no drama. She simply handed her the letter and the document. He never knew how to tell you what he should have, she said. But now it's your turn to decide what you do with that truth. Anna Lucia did not respond. She cried in silence, holding the paper in her hands, as if she were touching the father she never knew for the first time. Days later, the court issued the final sentence. Alfonso was sentenced to 32 years in prison, without parole for the crimes of aggravated homicide, tax fraud, document forgery, intimidation, and criminal association. 3 more officials fell with him. 2 judges were removed from office. A political scandal shook the structures of power in Tennessee, and in the midst of it all, Estelle gave no more interviews, never spoke in front of cameras again, did not seek the spotlight. She simply returned to the shelter, to her women, to her plants, to her peace. The day they officially inaugurated the second Holy Hope home, this time in Arizona, Estelle traveled by bus accompanied by Carla and Anna Lucia. She carried a small wooden box. No one knew what was inside. When they cut the ribbon, they asked her for a few words. She only said one phrase. "This is no longer a story. It is a legacy." She opened the box. Inside was Ignatius's letter and a photo of him, with Robert in his arms and a ceramic butterfly beside it. She placed it on a shelf next to the welcome altar. And so the story ended, not with a door closing, but with many opening at the same time. Because Estelle, the woman who was called Trash, who was dragged through the mud and through life, not only recovered her dignity, she transformed it into a refuge. She converted it into a living word, and she sowed it in other women who, like her, once believed that silence was their only inheritance. If this story moved you as much as it moved us to tell it, we invite you to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and like this video so that more people can hear it. And if you made it this far, write the word hope in the comments. That way, we will know that you, like Estelle, chose to rise with dignity. And if you want to support this channel so that we can continue telling stories like this, you can leave a super thanks. It helps us more than you imagine to continue creating content that deserves to be told. Thank you for joining us. And remember, sometimes justice comes late, but when it arrives, it changes everything.